Pull out your hose and grab your can. We're about to integrate another Pest Geek podcast. Hi, everybody. Frank Hernandez here, and welcome to the Pest Geek podcast, bringing you the latest information on pests, products, and politics from today's leading industry sources to help you start, manage, and grow your pest control business. Hey, welcome back. Welcome back to this edition of the Pest Geek podcast. We got a special guest today on the podcast, but I want to cover a couple of things with you that we got some really new, exciting stuff that I've been planning to do for the longest while, and got inspiration from one of our listeners, Jose Becerra out in California, wildlife guy, and he said, why don't you start getting local experts on local pest problems? And I said, man, that is something I've been wanting to do. Thanks for the inspiration. I think it's the time to do it. So we're doing a special feature on the Pest Geek podcast called Pest Pro Local or Pest Geek Local. And if you are a regional professional, and what classifies a professional? Well, if you're doing this and this is what you do for a living, you're a professional if you know what you're doing. So we want to bring on, promote local people on our podcast and our video podcast to promote them to clients, because we do get requests on the podcast for local people. Do you know a guy? I'm in California. I get calls on my line all the time. Our business is ranking nationwide. So it's been on my radar. I just haven't had the time to do it. No time like downtime to get it done. So if you are a local person that would like to do a podcast with me on a specialty local problem and how to solve that problem, how do you do it, and you want to give value to homeowners and to people listening and to other professionals on how you actually do this and you solve this problem, I would love to have you on my podcast. We'll do a video podcast. We SEO it for you. You get local geo tracking on that video, so that it is geo specific to your location, and we can promote you and help you. The other way that we're doing it is with Pest Pro Local. This is something that I've discussed with several people that I've been wanting to do for the longest time, but don't have the time. So Pest Pro Local is going to be a new state. It's going to be a state group that we're putting up. We have one for Florida right now, Texas, and California, which is about 50% of our audience and where most people are doing pest control. So we decided to give it a shot there. And what that is it's a group where you, as a local pest pro, sign up, get in, and I'm going to promote it, and people will be able to go on locally. And I live in, Southern California. I have this pest problem. Is there somebody that can help me? And then we can flag somebody, tag somebody that we know is in that area. You can comment, help them out, help them solve that problem. And, you might get a lead from it, because a lot of people, what they're confused about is they think they're going to be able to solve a lot of problems themselves. And when they need 3, 4, 5 products to do a simple job that looks simple, you can be the guy that helps them. So how much is this going to cost me, Frank? Look, it's going to cost you nothing, man. It's free. Why? I told you last year I'm going to do stuff like this. I told you I was doing things for the industry that nobody's doing. There's no association fee, no membership fee. What's the catch? There is no catch. Here's the simple reality. I understand this game. I understand how this social media thing works and how the new media works, and I've been discussing it to death forever. And those people that get it will be on there, will be effective, and they will get the leads. Those people that won't. It's just that simple. So if this is not appealing to you, you don't feel like you want to give away your free advice because it took you 15 years to earn it, and so did mine. Yet I give it away every day on this podcast for free, and I give great value. And that's what I'm talking about, giving value. So if you're interested in any one of these, go ahead and look up Pest Pro Local. There's one in Florida, one in Texas, and one in California right now. And we'll see how that goes. And we're going to do the Pest Pro Local podcast. So you want to sign up. How do I do it, Frank? You go to my website, Pest Geek Podcast, hit the guest button, fill out the form and register. Don't PM me. Don't IM me. Don't send me, well, I want to talk about this and what do you think about that? Look, you're the expert. You're the one that knows what you need to talk about. So if you'll come on my podcast, I'll give you a shot. And also, look, guys, if the phone isn't ringing, I mean, my phone started ringing last week, but I understand it hasn't been ringing for a lot of people. Some people are right now, they're cranking out the work, but others aren't. It might be the great time for you to get a vanity number. You've been thinking about it. Your business is doing great. You're expanding. You've got 5 trucks. And you've been thinking about getting one of those 888 got bugs or an easy to remember number like 1-800-600-500. Give Ring Boost a call. Go to ringboost.com. If you enter the promo code PEST15, you'll get 15% off any of the services that they have. If you go to Pest Geek Podcast /Pest, you're going to get 15%, guys, off of everything. So give my buddy Andrew a call over there. He's going to take great care of you. Also, hey, if you guys are getting great value from this and you just saying, man, I really appreciate what you do, and you can afford $5 a month, go ahead and go to our Patreon page. If you go to pestgeekpodcast.com and you hit donate and you want to, hey, great, man. We can do a lot more things that we can provide for everybody for free. I really do appreciate it. Pestgeekpodcast.com, hit donate, or go to patreon.com/pestgeek. And now, on to our special guest. So, hey, guys, I'm here with Chris Ernst, marketing guru for Catchmaster. What's up, Chris?
Not much, Franklin. I'm doing well. How about yourself? You hanging in there?
Doing good, man. You know, we were scheduled for a couple of weeks ago, and I've been, with the stress and with everything going on, and, I tried to take some time off and rest, and it just made it worse. I was with migraines and losing sleep, and I just decided to get up and stop doing that and crank out the marketing, which is what works for me for my YouTube, and that's how I get most of my business from YouTube. So we're going to have a really good time talking about branding and brand. And, but before I do that, by the way, bro, that is one killer beard, dude.
Thank you very much.
I tried growing.
You got one going
like
there
that.
too. I see.
I've had this beard since I started growing a beard when I was like, I think 16 or 17. I mean, I grow hair for a living, I think. But I can't grow one like that. And I said, I tried it once and I just couldn't do it. It just didn't look right for me. That is one killer beard, bro.
Thank you. Thank you very much. They always ask. So the biggest question I always get is people always say, well, what's the secret to the beard? So my number one thing is your significant other, your wife, your girlfriend, your partner, right? They got to like it. So that's like the number one thing. So my wife's into the beard. So that's the number one thing.
Yeah, mine too.
The second thing.
Like I shaved it once and she had like a major fit. I mean, she was talking lawyers. And so that's awesome. But what do you do to keep it so nice? I mean.
Well, so this is actually right now, this is, on a scale of 1 to 10 in grisliness. I'm at about an 8 or 9 right now.
Okay.
We've had barbershops closed in New Jersey since middle of March.
Right.
And usually my number 2 secret I was going to share is I have a really good barber. And I've had the same barber. So it's going on 4 years I've had the beard. So that's the second secret, is find a good barber who knows how to cut a beard, who can maintain it for you. And then the third secret, I'll give a shout out. There's a product that's called Beard Brand. It's all one word, Beard Brand.
Okay.
And they have balms and they have oils. So once it gets to a certain level, you gotta keep the products in it. So those are the 3 secrets to it.
Yeah, I just basically, I trim mine like at a number 3, and then I used a number 4 for my head. So I don't need a barber because I gave up on growing hair anymore in my head. It's like, it's all going from here to my back. So it's progressively lower. I mean, I'll probably have hairy feet in the next 10 years. So no, it's cool, man. So talk to me about you, man. I mean, what's Chris all about? What do you do, and what's going on there at Catchmaster?
Sure. Yeah. I think we have a lot of exciting things going on at Catchmaster right now. So I've been with the company for about 2 years.
Okay.
My title is Director of Brand Strategy, but I'm pretty much in charge of all of our content creation, all of our packaging, what's our go-to-market strategy, Also work in new product development in terms of things that we have in the pipeline. What are the new tools that we're looking at launching over, say, the next 2 to 3 years? How do we assess those as an organization if they align with our goals? So really wearing a lot of hats. And it's been awesome. So my marketing career goes back. Got my undergrad in marketing, got my MBA in marketing, actually got it in pharmaceutical marketing, which was 2 years enough to just let me know that that's not what I wanted to do with my life. But coming out of there, I actually worked for about 12 years with the company that makes Arm & Hammer products.
Okay.
So baking soda, your laundry detergent, your toothpaste, did brand management there, then did actually 4 years doing new product development there, which was really awesome. Got a lot of, tools that I've leveraged throughout my career that I acquired in that 4-year period. And then I spent about 4 years actually working for their agency of record, and helped bring a lot of social media properties to life to them. We launched like a Pinterest page for baking soda. That was a lot of fun. Kind of got burned out on the agency life after a while. You're always looking over your shoulder. There's a lot of competition. Right. You're only as good as your last phone call or last email conversation with your client, which after about 4 years, you get kind of tired of. So at the time, decided I wanted to make a career change and get back into something that was more along the lines of brand management. So managing a P&L, doing more creative development from briefing in versus receiving the brief and then working with the creative team.
Right.
And so when I started to look, Catchmaster just happened to have an opportunity. And it's actually funny, the way we started off the conversation is the way that I started off with my first interview at the company. And I'll never forget, I actually was talking to my wife going, I was like, hey, I'm interviewing. Should I shave the beard? It wasn't as grizzly. It was like maybe grizzly level 2 back in the day. But when I first walked in, Jonathan Frisch, who is one of the Frisch members, that's the family that owns the company. When I interviewed with him, we started off the interview the exact same way. He's like, okay, I can't ask you about your background. I can't ask any marketing questions. Just tell me about the beard. So we started talking all the beard, and this is my first time interviewing at that point in like 4 years. So I was kind of nervous going in, as right. Anyone would be, right? It's like riding a bike, so to speak. You haven't done it in a while, and then you're like, do I remember? But that just kicked off the conversation really well, and it's been great ever since. Right. The family is very supportive. They're really investing behind the brand right now, right. Both in terms of people they're bringing in the organization. And they really like when they bring people in, they'll say, hey, we're bringing you in to be the expert in the area. So they've really brought me in to be the expert in marketing. And it's been the best 2-year run of my career that I've had.
Awesome. No, that I've had similar experiences in my career where I got burned out several times. I think I'm just a little bit older than you. I'm hitting 50 this year in June, which is really starting to sink in that I'm hitting 50. You're
young looking 50.
Yeah, man, I hear that a lot. Yeah, thank you. And so I'm thinking back constantly at there's good and bad in it. It molded me, bad experiences, and I learned from them. Would I change things about it? I always have that philosophical question going on in my head. Would I ever change anything about all the decisions I've made? And man, I rather not, because I don't know what the outcome is. The outcome I know now. I know where I'm at. I know right. I'm in a good place. I'm really comfortable with myself.
Right.
I'm in a place where I know who I am. I know my capabilities. I know what I suck at. And I'm comfortable with all that. I'm just comfortable in myself. And a lot of people in career, they don't really fallen into yet what they really enjoy and appreciate, and right. they get really uncomfortable in their own skin. Like I remember going up the corporate ladder, having to prove myself. I'm at a point where I don't have to prove myself. I just enjoy what I know to do, and then I just give that. And that's my best. That's really my best. So it's pretty interesting. Let me ask you this, because I try to help a lot of kids, right, in career. And one of the biggest challenges that kids have is, what am I going to do for a career? How do I get into something? I don't even know what I'm going to do. And one of the things that we're struggling in this economy and the economy is good, it's also bad because we don't have a big job pool to choose from.
Right.
And we're competing. People don't realize, and owners, that you're competing for talent, but you're also competing for customers. And if you don't have the talent, you can't grow. It's very tough. And trying to help people that need to grow their business to start looking at that younger talent that's available, which is getting into college later and figuring out their career later and getting into the work life later, the iGeners and all this. When did you realize, or how the heck did you ever decide, I'm going to get into pharmaceutical marketing, or ended up in that career? I mean, talk me into that.
Yeah. So, well, I think, as you talk about people that are later in their, career and maybe not knowing exactly what they want to do. I mean, I was very lucky. I can trace exactly when I knew I wanted to get into marketing. Mm-hmm. I'll touch on when I knew I didn't want to do pharmaceutical marketing.
Right. Okay.
At the end of this. So I'll never forget, it was a 6th grade project. And we were asked to design a magazine ad. You were going to draw it, and I'll never forget. So at the time I was really, really, really into baseball cards. And I would design my own baseball cards. Okay. So for my ad, I made my own baseball card, and then I stapled it to the ad. So it would have been you would open it, you get a free baseball card, like a sample. I'll never get my 6th grade teacher. And at the time my family moved around a little bit. So behaviorally, I wasn't exactly the best at school, but this teacher had a lot of belief in me. Right. And I'll never get during parent teacher conference, he really kind of laid out for my parents, hey, this is what Chris is going through right now, just so you guys know, and kind of righted the ship. But anyway, on the feedback, I'll never forget, he said, that's a great marketing idea, putting a baseball card in the ad. And I was like, what's marketing? And he explained to me what marketing was. Wow. And I just sort of knew that that's what I wanted to get into. When I actually went to high school, so grew up in Indiana, went to high school in Virginia. And when I was in high school, I knew I wanted to stay in state for college. And James Madison University is where I got my undergrad, had a really good business school. And I knew that's, hey, that's where I want to go. It makes sense from a financial perspective, really good in-state tuition-wise for Virginia schools, including James Madison, if you're an in-state resident. And, the hardest part was getting through the first couple years at James Madison, because you really take overall courses. So right. Calculus, it made me want to cry. Statistics made me want to cry. But once I got through that and I got into the marketing courses, I knew that this is what I want to be. And then in my career, I mean, one of the biggest things, I guess, just something that I learned is, and this would be, I guess, a piece of advice for people is, you're going to have to wear a lot of hats in your career, most likely. And one thing I'll never forget is when I first started off. So marketing, sales, they're intertwined, right? And the best results I've seen in my career where marketing and sales are getting along hand in glove, right? Yeah, we're going to talk on that deeply, because that's usually two separate branches that clash, and I've experienced that in my life, mostly in the sales part. But I can imagine. That's a great point that we need to really cover on. So go ahead. I'm sorry. Yeah, no problem at all. And one of the things I started off in sales for my first 2 years when I got out, and my perspective was, hey, let me just get out there and let me get a job where I'm going to be at a desk where I can show my value, knowing that I can leverage that in the future. Again, knowing that sales and marketing are so closely intertwined. So literally for 2 years, I was on a phone. I was actually a computer software and actually hardware as well with a reseller based in New Jersey. My family actually moved to New Jersey. My first day at school at James Madison, we had 2 moving vans packed. One dropped off all my stuff at school, and the other one moved to New Jersey. So that's how I ended up in New Jersey after school. Wow. Okay. So, and to your point, I've seen from a marketing end, I've seen nothing derail a project, nothing derail a product you're trying to bring to market, more than marketing and sales and not getting along. Right. And that's, one of the things that I'm really fortunate with on working with Catchmaster and being a part of the brand, is we really have a fantastic sales force. I mean, these guys are road warriors. They're out there. They're going to the association meetings. They do a great job setting everything up. So when I started here, I said, hey, I know all I got to do is I just got to give these guys content. I got to give them things to put up on the table. I got to give them pamphlets that are going to help explain the products and all that. But, going back to career advice, again, it's be willing to wear different hats, but always think about it. Even if you don't know what your goal is, getting that different experience is going to give you a more holistic view when you do figure out what you want. And I feel like just having had that sales background has been always something that's been helpful.
Right.
So from there, when I started off in computer sales, eventually I knew I wanted to get to marketing. So I was fortunate enough to get there after about 2 years. Did some co-marketing with Microsoft. This is going back. You're not that much older than me. So this is going back to like the early 2000s when Microsoft was a behemoth. So just seeing how they went to market with stuff was a great opportunity, good learning experience. From there, got an opportunity to go back to Rutgers, get my MBA. That's when I went in to do pharmaceutical management. And so this would be another point in my career is, advice to people is, always listen to people, always be curious about things.
Right.
So at Rutgers, and a ton of pharmaceutical companies are basically located in New Jersey. So that's why the pharmaceutical management program came about with Rutgers. It was a great experience overall. But I'll never forget my second year there. We actually had ethics and pharmaceutical marketing course. And now, mind you, in my class, and there were maybe like 20, 25 kids in my class that were on this pharmaceutical management track. We are drinking the Kool-Aid, right? Meaning that we're coming off internships with pharmaceutical companies. We've been studying, how to market products, the supply chain, all the development that goes into, bringing a novel pharmaceutical to market, which is, back then that was like $2 billion you've invested just in research and development by the time it gets to market. Right. I'm sure now it's probably 3 to 4, depending, right? And so I'll never get this professor. He would basically get up in front of class and argue with us for like an hour and a half, right? And he took the whole thing about, well, have you guys thought about what might be bad about pharmaceutical, right? Or what might be bad about the pharmaceutical industry or certain business practices? Or have you thought about when you're detailing a doctor and pushing a drug? And have you thought about the fact that, there's some crazy stat, I think it's roughly like 70% of doctors, if you come in as a patient and you say, hey, I saw this ad on TV, that doctor is going to just write a script for you. Right. Not even asking, not even going back on the medical training. Now, this stat may have changed since I was in school. Maybe it's different. The marketing's changed, right? But that was one moment where I started to realize, like, this guy's getting up here. He's obviously taking us on. And it sort of made me realize that, there's a different way to look at this. And again, I was all Kool-Aid up. I was like, I can't wait to get in there. I'm going to do the same approach I had in software. Right. I'm going to, they call it carrying the bag in pharmaceuticals, but I'm going to go out and be a sales rep and eventually work my way up into a marketing role. And then the company I was interning with, actually at the time, they had what was intended to be a blockbuster drug for them that actually failed in phase 3 development. And what that basically means is they probably spent $1 billion and a half in development at that point. And when it fails in phase 3 trials, it means you're not going to ever go to market with it. And so they basically started cutting down the workforce, as pharmaceutical companies do. I mean, it's the nature of their business. Right. And that sort of made me realize that I remember interviewing with people at the company, and they were asking me, hey, how'd you learn how to format this resume? And they were basically like, because I think I need to do my resume. And I was like, I shouldn't be interviewing here, right? And they were like, no. And it just so happened at that time, Arm & Hammer came on campus to interview. And, I sort of realized, like, I don't want to do this career track where all of a sudden everything can get pulled out from under you. And then, that, hey, all of a sudden you're out of luck. All the hard work you put in with a company, right, is all for naught. So that's one of the things that pushed me towards getting into consumer packaged goods. So I guess that's another point of career advice is, there's going to be things in your career that are going to be like way beyond your control, right? At the time I was a marketing intern, and, a drug failing in testing, several countries away. at that point it impacted my career. So what can you learn from it? And, what you learn is different for each individual thing. But one thing I learned from that, it was time to try a different route and
Right.
go a different avenue.
No, that is, I've been in similar positions before. That has to be grueling to when you come out of college very idealistic. I mean,
Yes,
young
absolutely.
people just tend to be very idealistic. That's one of my biggest flaws, is that I'm overly idealistic. And I've had people who are way smarter than me tell me, the problem is you're too freaking idealistic. And going into a new company or whatever, that you're going to want to change things and you're going to change the world, and then you kind of get it sometimes pounded out of you. But you learn where you fit. And I guess trying to find a fit, and we do that in marketing and in employee management and in everything, where you fit and where you fit for your mentality, for your spirit. There are a lot of jobs that I did that just depressed the hell out of me. I mean, literally, I would wake up in bed one morning and say, not going in anymore. I'm done. I'm done. And I took a less paying job just so I can have peace of mind. I mean, that's happened to me twice, because it was so bad. But one of the things that you mentioned, going back to when you just, oh, this is brilliant. I got into marketing, and we'll have I want to have a kind of a really broad discussion about marketing, branding, sales, advertising, because the majority of people, especially pest control owners, wildlife owners, any small business owner in general, doesn't understand the whole marketing concept as a whole. And I look at a holistic concept as integrated pest management.
Right.
And their branding is a logo, and marketing is, putting out flyers. And let's talk about, before we get into what it is, can you briefly, or as exhaustively as you want to go with this, start explaining what marketing isn't?
Oh, that's great. That's a great question. I've never been asked that before. What marketing isn't? Well, I think you touched on it, right? Like, so you got your logo, that's your design, right? And that's your identity from a visual perspective, right?
Okay.
But just having a logo isn't marketing, right? I would say, and I got to give you props, man. You do a fantastic job with this. Content creation, right? So content creation, that is marketing. It is a marketing piece, but you also have to figure out how to get that to the audience. So I think really for me, marketing, I think, when I think of, like, what are the two most important aspects of marketing? I think number one is identifying who your target consumer is. Okay. And when I talk about target consumer, what I would really stress for people is, it's easy to say, hey, I want to target, and I'm making this up, women who are 25 to 35 with a kid in them, right? That's one level of it, and that's a good start. That's demographically who they are.
Right.
But I think it's really understanding psychographically who they are, right?
Okay.
And what I mean by that is not only, who they are, where they live, how you're going to get to them, all of that, which is all part of marketing. But, like, what are they looking for when they reach out to you? So when they reach out to a pest control operator, right? Mm-hmm. What is it like? What are the key things that they're going to look for? And when you think about, who your target consumer is too, don't just think about it as someone who's going to buy your products or buy your service. Think about it as someone, this is the person who not only are going to purchase my product, not only am I going to give them a service, and I'm going to be professional and trustworthy and have a guarantee, whatever it is that sets your service apart, right? But look for that consumer that is going to be your advocate. And so when I say advocate, I mean that person that's going to go and share on their, say, local Facebook group how awesome it was, to work with XYZ Pest Control, right? And think about what are the levers to get that. And if you can market to your hardcore folks who are going to be your advocates for you, who are going to carry that water for you, who are going to broadcast your message. Those diehards, look for your diehards. And if you don't know who your diehards are, like, look at the folks that, if you've been in for a year, who are the folks that keep coming back, or people who have added additional services? Talk to them. Ask them, hey, why did you come back? And maybe it's as simple as the pest pressure is out of control. And, maybe they have a mosquito problem and there's, standing water nearby that they can't control. It's in their neighbor's yard, whatever it is. But find out what are those drivers. Find out, ask them how the last time that you raved about a brand, and it might not be your brand.
Right.
What were the reasons? Why did you do that? Why did you rave that? So really get an understanding for who your target consumer is, right? And what their drivers are. And then the second part is, finding the right, and it's the thing I can't stress enough is what's really happened. And this is something that's really changed marketing. And I still feel to some degree people haven't really adjusted to it and I just think of my old industry, consumer packaged goods. I think of, maybe the food industry a little bit, certainly some of like the big automotive makers and stuff like that, is there used to be, and this is from like the advent of what I would call modern American marketing, which started in the 1950s roughly, right?
Okay.
Post-war boom, Mad Men, all of that, right? There was, the way you went to market there was print advertising, there was TV advertising, there was radio advertising, there was word of mouth stuff you could do, community involvement, all that sort of stuff. But the big three certainly were like print advertising, TV advertising, and what you would do in like a newspaper, right? But if you really look, say, and it wasn't even, I would say 2000s, I would say it was maybe 2010, really once, social media got a big traction.
Right.
That has been upended, right? So, and you're a perfect example. I know, you shared the experience where you were writing a blog article a day. I think this was maybe like 5 or 6 years ago, which I think about writing a blog article a day, and it makes my head hurt a little bit. But that is, what you discovered is that, and you were placing, it's like Easter eggs, right? You want to place Easter eggs out where people are going to find them.
Right.
What you're trying to get to, right? So, your expertise as a pest control operator, think of all the ways that you can share that, because that's one thing that consumers, and this is, I know it's statistical data. I think it's PPMA puts it out, and they've seen the same three things over and over that consumers look for. It's professionalism, trustworthiness, and having some sort of guarantee. But the professionalism and the trustworthiness, right? Those are things that when you create a video, when you write a blog article, when you do a social media post, you are sharing those things. And, I think that's just something that when I think of a way that you're going to get to your target consumer, maybe they watch YouTube, maybe they're on Facebook, maybe they're on Twitter, LinkedIn, whatever it is, right? Lay as many bits of content as you can out, okay? Right. When you do, there's a concept called A/B testing, which is basically you would do two different versions of a video, right? And maybe one has an opening where you talk about, hey, it's mosquito season, get ready. And then maybe the other one is, you got mosquitoes, we need to get them now, right? That sort of thing. That's not good messaging. That's what marketing isn't, by the way. That's not good copy. But the idea is, if you can do two different versions at the same time, serve it up to relatively the same audience, and one performs better, whether it's, if you're measuring click-throughs, if you're measuring reach, if you're measuring how many, sales calls you got out of whatever it is, whatever your metric is, that'll give you a sense for like, oh, we need to do more seasonal messaging, or no, we need to more about, hey, we just need to address the problem. So I think it's the two things. So it's knowing who your consumer target is, right? And then putting out as much content as is, and start small and experiment, but as many little different places as you think that consumer target is going to find it, and share it with other people. I think that's, at least right now, when I think of my modern definition of marketing, I think that's two
Yeah.
two
What
things that are in my head that stand out.
what I started doing this year, I basically focused on three things because I was limited in experience, expertise, and bandwidth. So I started just doing my blog and YouTube videos because I'm comfortable behind a camera, and I just basically took little shots. And my specialty, my niche, I mean, I understood who my exactly going through all of those things. My customers, I went in a niche market with eco-friendly pest control. My clients are usually very wealthy, highly educated. 90%, 80% of the time I'm dealing with women. So I didn't want to have a bunch of gross aspects. Going online with the videos, my specialty was plant healthcare, where I could really do some things with organics. So I focused on that. And then I started making videos and my blog. And that was pretty much it. And then Facebook has not really taken off for me in that aspect, probably because I haven't devoted any time to it. And that's just a reality. I've been comfortable. And so I was making those two contents daily. I literally was, for the first, a week, I was making one video a week for that, and then writing a blog. Now, with the podcast, it's a different market, different mentality, and I'm doing more large scale pillar content.
Yep.
And then doing exactly what you're doing is breaking it down into little pieces where I might put a 15-second TikTok video, and then I'll put maybe a 3 or 6 minute Instagram video, and have this pillar content on YouTube, and it all links back to my YouTube channel. Not focus so much on my website, focus more on the content that I want people to consume, which is the YouTube material. Because people are looking for, I do most of my search now, believe it or not, when it's a how-to thing, I'll go to YouTube and do my search there. When I need hard data, I'm going to Google.
Yep.
And that's just been my thinking, because I don't have time to consume a 3,000 word article on how to solve a simple problem, because you got to write 3,000 words to rank. and I look for a recipe, and I'm frustrated that the recipe's all the way at the bottom when it tells me the ingredients, and then 3,000 words of, fluff. And that's the reality of where it's at. So that's been my strategy now for Pest Geek, is to do that major content like we're doing with you now. We'll post that 1 hour, 2 hour video, and then start breaking it up into pieces and making micro content from it. So the guy who might be interested only in how do we help kids find their career, we use that content for that purpose and repurpose all the content. So and I'm putting in a good 4 hours a day on this right now, but I have more time, and it does, and to simplify it and oversimplify it, to think it's easy, it's not. But for the guy who might be starting out, says, I have no money, right, but I got time, right? And it's always the case. You either have money, you got time. So
you got money, you got time. Exactly.
So that's been my thing. So in branding, we already discussed some of the aspects of branding, but what I find with pest control businesses, different than large corps who have a different goal, the small business guy is usually 1 to 3 people.
Right.
Most, I think I was looking at a study the other day, I think, and help me out with this. I think roughly about more than 50% of the businesses in America, whether it's pest control, whether it doesn't matter, it's under 5 people. Yeah. Is that number pretty close?
Yeah, that sounds right. I mean, when you think about the local businesses throughout the U.S., right?
Only so many have 20 or more, and I think 10% are 500 or more. Those are the mega large corporations.
Sure.
The little guy, who is, whether you're a wildlife operator, pest control operator, cleaning company, it doesn't matter. You're usually 2 to 3 people, and usually brand to them is just basically been about personal brand, when they're about what their customers know about them. The concept of branding their company in either perpetuity or having an exit strategy. They don't have an exit strategy. They don't have an issue where they're thinking, I'm going to build this brand up so I can sell it, and they don't. And then they find out that nobody knows who they are except the 150, 300 customers they have. and then they don't. So the personal brand is them. I am doing both. I'm building both my corporate brand and my personal brand with this podcast. So help understand how you can transition from one to the other and focus on it, or do both in some cases. What's your advice on that, and how will we handle that?
Sure. Yeah. So when I think, you're absolutely right. And you said so many great things, by the way. I want to touch on some stuff later.
Okay.
You mentioned pillar pages. So not for right now, but I want to get back to that, because I just personally, I want to hear from you more and your experience on that. That's just something we recently did. But so going back to, like a operator, say they've got, it's them, it's their brand. Maybe they've got one or two other techs that are part of the company. I think is the example that you gave, right?
Yeah.
And you talk about, how do I differentiate, who I am because I'm the expertise versus what does our brand stand for? And then, at some point, you're right, there's an exit strategy, and do you want to grow it? Do you want to at some point sell it? I mean, we know consolidation is a huge thing in the industry, right? And acquisitions and all that. So, as far as separating you from the brand, what I think actually is, and if I were to say someone just starting out, right, here were like three things that I would think about in terms of, how you go about marketing, right? So first is, and this is the most overused word, I hate using it, but I'm gonna use it, but it's strategy, right? So define what your brand strategy is. The second is start small. That gets a little bit of producing like the bite-sized content, that sort of stuff that you can do. And the third is share, and by share, it means we like to say our philosophy is we believe in content without borders. So you touched on it. If I'm going to do a hour video, there may be a 5-minute portion of that that's relevant to someone. We're going to chop it up, and then we're going to share it wherever we can, right? So your strategy, I think, really gets to, the branding aspect, right? And so what I think would be a worthwhile exercise for anybody, and this is, strategy, it sounds so nebulous sometimes, right? Yeah. Like, oh, you got to have a strategy. But one thing that, I've done in my career, it's actually called, it's a guiding light exercise. Okay. And there are 5 different things to your guiding light. Okay. It's what is your brand purpose. Okay. And the key to this is going back to the idea of I'm separating Chris's pest control from Chris Ernst. Right. So you need to think about what would be Chris's pest control. Right. So there's 5 things. So it's the brand purpose, it's the brand promise, brand treasures, brand spirit, and then your brand advocates. I know we kind of touched on the advocates a little bit, but your advocate isn't just who's buying your service, it's who's going to go and rave about you. Those are the most important people to market to, right? So your brand purpose is the way to think of, basically the best way I've heard to think about it is if Chris's pest control was a person, and I know this goes back to separating Chris the person from Chris's pest control. We got to think about it in terms of your brand and the company. When they wake up and get out of bed in the morning, what's the reason they're getting out of bed in the morning, right? So like an example, and I don't want to, you obviously know this better than I ever would. So but I'm just using you as an example, right? Yeah. Frank's Pest Control gets out in bed in the morning because they know that providing, an eco-friendly service to, you're in Miami-Dade, right? Providing service to them is an important part of promoting public health, right? I may have done a horrible job of stating that. My apologies.
No, that's fine.
But that's that's getting ideas. Why does your brand get out of bed in the morning? Like, what's the greater good it's striving for, right? Your brand promise is pretty simple. Like, what is it that you're promising to people, right? Is it, hey, it's a one-time treatment, and we guarantee our service. The callback's on us, or is it something else? And this also, one of the key things about branding is how are you differentiating yourself from everybody else in your area, right? I know you have, it's like 400, pest control companies, right? In your
it's
county alone,
it's pretty big.
said.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, how are you differentiating yourself? I mean, that's ultimately one of the biggest things about branding is what's really making it different, right? So,
right. Before you go any further, because that one is something that is so people, think about this for the average pest control guy. We spray, we kill bugs. I mean, that's the extent of, so for them to say, how do I differentiate myself? Because when I posted a couple of weeks ago about perfect competition, and people don't understand that concept. They were like, well, nobody has perfect competition. There's no such thing as perfect. I said, you understand that when you're in a saturated market and you're one guppy in a big pond.
Right.
So how would somebody that wanted to differentiate themselves in a market where they're doing what is viewed as a commodity? The pest control is a commodity. Nobody wants to accept that, but pest control is a commodity. It's your brand and the things that we're talking about that differentiate you. But how somebody would simply try to differentiate themselves? How would they communicate that in a way to their whatever print and whatever they're in that actually creates a differentiating factor?
Yeah. So that's a great question. I think part of the answer, and this is, going back to knowing who your target consumer is, right? Knowing what they're looking for, and then knowing the way that you can say, hey, what I'm offering is entirely different. It's a new, and so these are just some thoughts. And the key thing for this too is you got to experiment. You may not find out what it is right away. But when you think of, hey, do you have a leave behind like that? Not isn't just, hey, call me back the next time there's an issue, but hey, here's the pest that I treated for or did whatever for, right? Here's some signs to watch out for. Here's the season where it may be active. But point being is that, as opposed to just going out and I'm spraying your property or I'm, doing something in your house, whatever it is, I'm leaving something behind with the consumer. So that's perhaps one way to differentiate, right? Another way to potentially differentiate, obviously, very well, eco-friendly, right? So consumers, I mean, and this is more on the, and I know you say it's about 20% of the market's going to actually pay for a professional to come to the house. About 80% is going to go DIY, right? They're going to go to whatever their big box retailer and get it. But, everyone's looking for ways to minimize the chemical exposure in my house, right? So that may be a way to do it. Now, in perfect competition, theoretically, someone's already out there doing it, right? So is there a way that you talk about, hey, we're like the next level of eco-friendly? So, are your, techs protected in some way? Have you gone to like an eco-friendly fleet? You have hybrids, right? Whatever it is, right? That's a way that, you could further differentiate from even someone else who's doing eco-friendly, which in itself is a differentiator. I also think just, and this goes back to thinking about the, someone with under say 5 techs, right? Still relatively, small company is, what makes those techs different? One of the things that I think is great is share that, like share who they are as a person and, what passion do they have for pest control? Because then you're differentiating your people a little bit, right? We're the friendly technicians. We're going to come there and, maybe it's as well, like, is there a follow-up you can do? Can you shoot a video, that you're only sending to that customer of you actually applying the treatment? So they get it, maybe they're not at home and they get it, on their phone, like, hey, here's me. And, maybe it's pointing out things. And this is, you can always sell add-on services, but it can come across as like a consultation or, hey, you may want to know, right? So exclusion is always something to me that's, when I first learned about IPM, right, it was, and this is from a marketing, I come in without a strong pest control background, right? When I first learned about it, I was like, okay, it makes sense now. If you have a pest in your home, if you have a pest on your property, like it figured out a way to get there. Like generally speaking, they're searching the same things we want, right? Which is food, warmth, shelter.
Right.
Big three, right? But if you think about that approach and selling that, and maybe it's not even like, hey, we do an exclusion service, and not just that, but hey, I noticed, one of the reasons I may have been in here is, you have a crack in the doorway. So that may be leading to it, or there's, a gap in your foundation here, pointing out those sort of things. So is it being more helpful? Like, then it's almost sort of like you're auditing the property. So, I think it goes back to who your target consumer is. Why are they reaching out for a pest control thing? And then what's that next thing that you can do that the next guy or the next girl isn't doing that can set you apart is a way to differentiate yourself.
Right. Yeah. We're talking about ethics in pharmaceutical. A lot of the guys, when you start talking about sales and marketing, it's a total turnoff to them.
Yeah.
Especially the really small independent guy, because he came out of a sales and marketing company mentality, and he wants to get far away from that, not realizing that you can create your own brand with your own ethics and your own morals and brand that.
Yeah.
And you have to just become articulate about communicating it, which is what the marketing does, which is what the branding does. And then so that you can actually go out and have fun selling that, and that becomes your purpose.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
And that's where a lot of people are missing it. They're not focused on, how do I take a nonprofit, for example, and differentiate one nonprofit from another nonprofit, right, and have a purpose. So trying to deal with that, communicating those things, because what they want to do is, a lot of the time they get into pestinese. They start talking about things in tech like IPM.
I'm gonna borrow that in the future.
Yeah, pestinese.
I'm gonna borrow that word.
Yeah, go ahead, and then you just put it by Frank Hernandez.
I will. I'll give you a trademark on it.
There you go.
Cite you.
So we start speaking pestinese, and we're telling people about a lot of buttons that are IPM and exclusion without explaining it.
Sure.
And that's where the problem is, because then what happens is, if you come out and you say something that you have to break it down for the client in a way the client can understand it, which is not technical. Yeah. But then you get accused of, in the industry, the small guys and all these little camaraderies there are, that, well, that's just not accurate.
Right.
And having to deal with that in the marketing of the accuracy, but then having to, let's call it, for a bad word, which is probably a bad use, to water it down.
Right.
And a lot of times that's what's necessary.
Yeah.
So when you're doing, like, I've seen some of your marketing pieces, which motivated me to start doing some of these little marketing pieces of information that I had laying around, and you started putting these little infographics.
Yes.
And they're very simple.
Yeah.
What's your thought process of doing those simple infographics that don't have, because they want to stick, like, in 12-point font, 700 characters on an infographic, and it really isn't necessary. Talk to me about what you're doing with those infographics, how you're using them, and how is that part of the, let's say, the strategy? Because these are tactics. These are little bite-sized tactics, but it takes patience. And I think that's where a lot of people are. And I see the patience of you constantly putting out stuff a little bit at a time. And how does that work in brand imaging and brand consciousness? Yeah.
So the way it links back, at least for us, the way that we think of, what are our brand colors, and this is just from a design perspective, right?
Okay.
So this isn't even, from a higher level. This is when you really get down into the weeds, like we're actually producing content, right?
Right.
So we have our brand color that's important, that's tied throughout. We have our brand logo that we put on everything. We figure out a little corner to stash it, even if, some of the graphics you're talking about, it's talking about a pest. So we make sure that that's the common thread that ties throughout. But for us, and I mean, this kind of goes back to what the Catchmaster brand stands for. So it's very specific to Catchmaster. It's going to be different for other pest control, operators. It might be different because, our thing is we're marketing the pest control operators, whereas a pest control operator is going to be marketing to the consumer. So this may be where I diverge a little bit, but it's overall marketing stuff. So I'll try to tie it back. If I get too far from the left field, just flag me. So, for us, one of the key things that, really comes down to it is when you think about a smaller operator who maybe doesn't have the marketing resources of a bigger company, right? And this is why I say sharing is so important. You don't have to create the content all the time. Sometimes we just do article shares and it does really well. But we sort of realized, and this sort of ties back to what the Catchmaster brand stands for. So this is why it was easy for us, because it was already baked into our DNA, already what we had defined when we looked at doing our brand guiding lights is, the way we look at it in pest control is we want to enable the businesses to be the best they can be, right? And so there's kind of a two-pronged approach that sort of come out in our content that we've created. I'm glad you like it. I mean, hearing it from me, that really means a lot. I can't wait to share this with my design team. So you made my day already. So I appreciate that.
Thank you.
But one thing is, and so we've just discovered this is people are fascinated by the world of pests, like just fascinated. And we've seen that whenever we do, it's a mosquito life cycle graphic. It's a rat population growth. There's just something there that has, I call it stoppability power, right? Where, everyone's on their feed, they're scrolling down, and all of a sudden there's this graphic that they stop and look at. So what we try to do in one part of the content is we want it to be something that somebody's going to share. So meaning that if you are, a smaller company that doesn't have the amount of time to spend in developing your channel, hey, it's great. Just take our stuff and share it, because just being active on social media is extremely as important, as I'm sure that you can attest, right? So we want to make it shareable. So something about the pest world that's shareable. So that's sort of one part of our infographics that we've created. And that's probably more closely consumer related. I found that, there is no limit on the amount of interest people have shown in pests is just what I've seen. And then sort of the second prong approach that we do with, and this is more when we get into talking about our products, right? And so, what's the right balance? It's 80-20 is what people recommend. Like 80% of your content should be just general instructional content or educational content. And then 20% of your content is where you're actually talking about your products. Like it's, say soft sell versus hard sell, 80-20, right? But when we get to talking about our products, one of the things that, and, roughly 80% of our products are glue boards and monitors, right? And, when you actually, for us, when we're creating that content, as opposed to being something like, hey, we want you to share this or we want you to do it, the purpose of that content is more, we're trying to educate you now. So one of the biggest things that we try to do is on one piece of graphic, you can see it, over my shoulder right there, just talking about a glue board. And a glue board, I'll never get when I first started off, and I went to some, just did cold visits to distributors. Just went in and just started doing some research, having people tell me about the Catchmaster brand. I'll never forget someone told me, they said, well, Catchmaster, you guys are like the catcher's. I was like, so anytime there's something sticky as a marketer, I'm always like attracted to it. So I was like, I had to immediately like drill down on it. Like, well, what do you mean it's a catcher's mitt? He's like, if you play baseball, you're on the field and you need a mitt. You have a monitor, you have a glue board. That's just in your truck. That's part of being in the game, right? And so it's a device that's a big part of IPM, but everybody has it. But to some degree, it's like you learn maybe the first basics about it, but you don't get any more beyond that because you can just keep doing the basics and getting by.
Right.
So we try to make our educational pieces like, well, what's the next thing? And I have a great technical team that I work with. I'll give them a shout out, Ed Dolshin and Stan Cope. Ed's more on the rodent side, and Stan's on the mosquito side for us. But they have just educated me in a short amount of time. And so what I do as a marketer is I go, and when I work with our creative team in producing it, how can I take the knowledge that they have that's maybe something a little bit more, beneath the surface about our products, and communicate that in a, 8.5 by 11 graphic. And what do we put in? How do we make it simple? You're absolutely right about keeping stuff simple, by the way. I don't want to gloss over that. So we always go to icons, seem to resonate very well.
Right.
Like if there's something that you can say with an icon attached to it, people are going to remember that, I think, a little bit better. So that's kind of the two-pronged approach that we've taken. One is, how do we bring this crazy world of pests alive for people in relatable graphics that then PCOs want to share, versus, hey, we're talking about our products now, we need a little bit more educational. But in that education, how do we, KISS, how do we keep it simple?
Yeah.
So that's kind of the two-pronged approach for us.
Yeah. No, one of the things that, and I want you to help us out with, is you're putting out you're dripping out drip content. That's the method. What most PCOs and most small business owners, I mean, I've done a lot with a lot of different small business and a lot of small business owners. The issue of strategy, tactics, and then patience.
Yeah.
To see, because they don't usually have a strategy. You have a strategy and you say, we're going to do this, and we're going to create this much content throughout the year. We're going to drip it out, and we're going to create this brand in people's mind. We're going to brand it in their mind. And what happens with a lot of people is they get bored of their own marketing. They get tired of seeing, how many pieces do I have to put out before I see results? In other words, it becomes transactional, not brand, and not that brand is about the longevity of it. But they start getting bored, and they start creating different. All of a sudden, now the content looks different. They don't stay with the color scheme because they get tired of the color scheme. They get tired of seeing it, and they think everybody's tired of seeing it. And the reason nobody's responding is because everybody's tired of seeing it.
Right.
And they expect that I'm going to put out 15 pieces of content, and I'm going to have this massive following. How many, just to in your strategy, and I know you can't give away a lot of, whatever secrets you have that you're doing, but in the essence of it, how many pieces of content are you looking at just on those 8.5s that you're putting out on mosquito and rats alone? Are you looking at putting out within the next year?
Well, first of all, you have a great point, which is, and this is, until you said it, I never really had actually formulated the thought in my mind, but it's been there. You're right. I mean, so part of marketing, so one of my favorite quotes that I love right now is consistency breeds simplicity, right? So once you have a standard brand look, your standard brand color, your logo that you should be including in everything, the more that you hammer that home, the more you have similar copy points, it's going to be better for your business. Now, the issue is, and you're right, I've shared this, I've written an article like this 5 different times, I'm over this, for the consumer, it's still new, right? So it's not about what you're thinking and, people are sick and tired of hearing this. Because guess what? You may show that piece of content to, and I'm, just throwing numbers out, 100 people, right? And they're not going to respond. But it could be that 101st person that's going to see that, right? And maybe you didn't get that audience until, hey, this is a piece of content I shared 3-4 times on my page now before you even got 100 impressions, right? But it's that 101st person. It's new to them. And no one goes back and ever, my personal experience, and I guess I shouldn't say this, is it's not an absolute. In fact, I can say, without giving away too much, is there's some content that once we know it resonated very well, we'll go back and share it again the next year. Or you could go back and share it the next month, right? I haven't seen anybody flag anything. This is, of course, now that I brought it up. Next thing you know, I'm going to log on to Facebook and someone's be like, hey, you already posted it, because I jinxed myself, right?
Right.
But my personal experience has been, and now it's within relative limits. Does anybody want to see you keep posting the same thing 5 times a day? No, they don't. Right. But the feed is as, when you think of someone, and obviously I'm very specific on social media right now, but the feed is only as recent as the last 5, 6 things that they looked at, right? So the chance that you're ever going to show up with the way that Facebook has their algorithms tramped down now, or even YouTube or wherever, right? The fact that, unless you're paying for it, which is an entirely different discussion altogether, but the fact that you think they're going to, an individual consumer is going to see your thing like 7, 8 times, and I can't believe that Chris's Pest Control keeps posting it. My personal experience has been that's not going to be the case.
Right.
So, and this is one thing. So when we look at our content calendar, right, and now this is all separate. I'm talking about just social media right now.
Right.
We're very lucky as a brand because when I came in, we are spending very well in what we do in terms of the magazines. So PCT and PMP, right. As well as what all our sales reps are doing by being a part of the associations and going to those meetings. So, we look at it as like our 360 degree, right? We're touching on all of these things, even though right now I'm very specifically speaking about social media. But when I think about social media in our content calendar, so we have we try to share something every weekday. And we'll even do it on the weekend if we can, if there's like a special, like Mother's Day is coming up, right? But what we've learned, and I'm lucky because I have a great graphic design team, which I realize a lot of people don't have the privilege of having. So, but let me hold that thought until the very end here, because there are some resources I think that people can do to get something very quickly for them. So we basically try to share a new piece of content every weekday. The reason for doing that is because it keeps our Facebook feed fresh. It allows us to experiment. It allows us to share all sorts of stuff. And there's, part of this too, part of, learning and getting better is failing. Like you learn from your failures. So you're going to be stuff that's not going to get a lot of views versus stuff that takes off like crazy. But then what we've done to lessen the load is, look at the data you get back from it. Look at how many people viewed it, how many people clicked on it. There's all sorts of metrics you get from a page, right? And when something does well, what do you learn from it? What do you think resonated? And if something does well, don't be ashamed to go back and share that again. Because guess what? If that reached 200 people the first time, it may reach 400 people the next time, right? And just on the thought of, some resources that if you don't have a graphic design team, right? And if you don't have in-house creative resources, here's just a couple thoughts. And this is going back to thinking about someone who's, under 5 or less employees, right? So a couple of different things. Number one is it's free to share stuff, right? Meaning if you go to, and if it's, obviously Catchmaster, I have to say it, that's a great place to look at our Facebook page, facebook.com Catchmaster Pro, right? But there's other manufacturers out there who have all sorts of great content. All you can do is take that, share that on your page, right? So that's one way to do it. News articles, everybody's in the same game. They've made their article sharing. So just sharing something about, is it Pizza Rat or is it Bagel Rat, or whoever it is, right? This is free content that you don't need a graphic designer to do, that you can just post on your page and, people are going to see. And then the third thing would be is, and when you look at some of the associations, and I think it's MPMA and I think PPMA does it as well, they create stuff where they're like, hey, this is made for you to take and go and post on your page, right? So those are 3, if you think about, and when you start out small. You don't have to share everything every day if that feels too daunting for you, right? But start off with a schedule, make a content calendar. And if you think like, okay, hey, I want to share, just start off one thing a week, right? When you think about your first month and those 3 sources, guess what? You're 75% of the way done. Right. Next thing you got to do is, figure out something. And I would strongly urge, again, going back to like what differentiates you, figuring that out. Is it a video you can shoot real quickly? Video is something that you can do on a phone, right?
Nobody has an excuse of why they can't shoot a video.
Yeah.
I mean, it does it. And one of the things, just to, because I look at I just analyze the concept of I see you start posting and I say, oh man, he's posting this stuff. This is pretty cool. And then I start analyzing. So one of the things that I like, very simply to people to do is, one thought, and then a simple graphic and maybe 3 points.
Yep.
And 3 bullet points.
Yep.
Because a lot of the times we want to communicate so much when we should be creating more thought.
Yes.
So making it thought provoking versus, and then don't, what they do is they'll take a post, and instead of putting and trying to brand their company, they're trying to sell a service. So everything becomes spammy when you're posting a $19.99 service on your business page for your clients, where they're getting spammed all the time versus being educated.
Right. Because
they get this, again, they start thinking transactionally and not brand. And brand, I think I don't know if I lost you there. I don't know if you can still hear me. Let me see here, make sure. Are you there?
I can hear you, Frank.
Okay, yeah, because you just went totally dead for a second.
Yeah.
There. So, and
I'm getting the notice now. My internet connection is unstable. We're actually the hardest part about this, by the way, personally for me, with everything right now, quarantine, et cetera, is we become an instant daycare to a 4-year-old and a 18-month-old. So I believe they have circle time right now. They may have logged onto the TV upstairs, and so my bandwidth may have gone down. So I apologize for that.
No, that's okay. That's okay. Don't worry about it. So the whole idea of this patience thing, of repeating over and over, and it becomes repetitive. So where they get tired. I see guys that, I'm tired of my logo, I want to change it. Worst idea in the world, because you're tired of it. Just because you're tired of it doesn't mean. I mean, if I'm in a city, just to give you some context, 1.8 million people.
Big city.
I've had my logo now, which is actually, my logo was just actually from my other company that I had for 9 years previous to that. And what I did is just basically kept the same artwork, just changed the name. So people visually kept the same colors on the text. And we went from one name from One Property Services with a logo to Nature Pest with the same logo, because the whole issue was that we were a greener company, the way we were doing things. And it was complicated logo for a lot of reasons. So we simplified it, still kept a lot of the concept. But nobody's seen my logo in 1 million people. And it's been now a couple of years. Nobody's seen that logo. Nobody's tired of it. So one of the things that is that brand consistency of, that the color consistency and all that, and the patience.
Yes.
To do it consistently day in and day out, when it apparently having no, because my blog did not take off. Look, I did this consistently for 1 year before I started getting traction from my blog.
Yeah.
And my videos. I mean, I had done 52 videos before I started getting any business from it.
Yeah. And that's, so a couple different things. You're absolutely right about your logo, right? And this is why upfront, and even as much I hate to use it, but your strategy, right? Like, what's your strategy? Like, what do you want your logo to convey? Like, the reason that's important to set it up front is because, you're right. Changing your logo every 2 to 3 years, generally my experience, you're only going to be confusing your consumer. Now, you can contemporize the way that the logo is presented, right? But changing it all the time, it's, again, consistency breeds simplicity. And in this case, it's for a consumer. I've seen that logo before. I trust that. They must know what they're talking about. Like, just redundancy, even though for you, it's, something you're going to live and every day you're going to wake up with it. The consumer's not like that. The consumer, think about all the logos they're bombarded with throughout their entire day. I'd love to know what the number is. I mean, it's got to be in the thousands. I'm certain a number of different logos you see, right? And that's across everybody. Your Nike, your Apple, your everything. Your pest control logo is just a part of that, right? So that's why it's important to set those foundational principles up front, right? But you're absolutely right. Like, people aren't going to be, you're going to be burned out on your logo way earlier than anybody else is, because you're going to see it a lot more.
Right.
But it may just be at the point, and your example with the YouTube videos is a great example now. Listen, I commend you, because that was forward thinking on your part, right? And I'm sure while you were doing it, you may have thought like, hey, is this worth it? I'm not getting hits or anything like that. But you're investing in your strategy, right? And your strategy was, I'm going to put all this content out here. I'm going to become the expert in these little things. And what you're really getting at is, you're basically SEOing your service, right? Your business, right. Because, and it is a long game, right? You're not going to win with that first piece of content you're going to put out. You're probably not going to win with like the 100th piece of content. Right. But it's the entirety of that, right? That's going to give you the best shot in the long run. And, doing a blog post, one thing on that is, look, once that blog post is up, it's not like a Facebook ad campaign, or it's not like a Google ad campaign. Like, that is yours, right? And, one of the things I definitely would recommend to people is figure out what your hub is going to be. So for us, our hub is our website, okay? And so everything's going to push to the website. So we're active on social media, but we're always including a link back to the website, right? For you, it's YouTube, right? It's the YouTube channel and getting people to subscribe to the podcast. Like, that's the hub. So figure out what your hub is, but drive your content there. And, you're absolutely right. It's a long game. It's not, no one's going to redesign a logo. Graphic designers everywhere are going to hate me about this, but you're not going to redesign a logo and all of a sudden there's a 25% business. That doesn't happen, right? No. And, I've been part of stuff where we spent hundreds of thousands of dollars in consumer research, okay, looking at different logos. And we're like, this is it. It's going to be a lift, change it up, get in a market. I've yet to see one that provided anything beyond maybe a 1 to 2%, maybe 5% business lift. And it's hard to actually separate that from, whatever else we were doing in the market, whether it was new advertising. So yeah, definitely settle on a logo and don't ever get tired of it, because that is your watermark. That's how consumers are going to identify you.
Right. You mentioned you wanted to get back to a couple of points that I made.
Yes.
Now, we talked so much that I forgot which one of the points it was.
It's actually funny. I have a pen I brought here, and I haven't used it once. I was like, I need to jot down. So pillar pages, and this is actually topical, right? So, because I do want to share.
And you explained what that means versus I.
Yeah.
You probably did a better job there.
When you threw that out, it was like, because a little bit is I always call it, when I'm talking to the sales force, when I'm talking to everybody else, I always call it marketing nerdery, right? Which is like, we love our little buzzwords, and then it's like no one else knows what it is.
Right.
So a pillar page, simply put, is it's a collection of articles. Okay. And so what that would be is, and I strongly advise everybody out there, if you have a website, definitely blog. Like, again, it's what consumers are looking for out of pest control operators. It's professionalism, and it's trustworthiness. Well, how do you if someone doesn't know you, how do you display trustworthiness, right? And the one thing that all pest control operators have, even people starting out, that the average consumer doesn't, is you have a ton of knowledge about pests, right? From how they got there, what they're doing, what their habits are, when you're going to see them, right? So the way to think about a pillar page is, if you write a ton of stuff on one particular topic, okay? So let's say it's mosquito control, right? Write about all the distant aspects of it, and always think of, like, journalistically, right? The who, what, the when, the where, the why, and the how, right? Each one of those could be a separate article, right? But when you do that on your pillar page, you want everything you create on a specific topic to be there. And basically, so if you wrote 6 articles, okay, and then you wrote one pillar page, it's going to be an excerpt from each one of those articles explaining holistically all about mosquitoes in your area. And the great part is you could own it, right? So you could own, mosquito control in Roanoke County, Virginia, right? Where I lived for a while. Like, and not only that, but guess what? The person that is probably searching for mosquito control in Roanoke County, Virginia is probably going to be in your target, right? Like that's someone that you're going to want to talk to. So you can write extensively about the history, about what species are there, about what time of year they come out, about each one could be a separate article. But if you create like a Roanoke County mosquito resource page and link to each one of those articles, that's basically a pillar page.
Right.
And what that allows you to do is allows you to basically, it's all about SEO, so search engine optimization,
right?
All about where Google's going to rank you, right? And the more that you link, and the key thing too when you do this is link to other resources, reach out to people, network, like other people in business. Would they have an interest in linking back to your page? Because these are all big things that Google looks at that's going to basically raise you up in search.
Right.
So that's I got a little bit off the end there, but that's
fine.
What a pillar page is.
Yeah.
And I'll share, just an example for us that we just had, and this is something I'm very proud of. And this is actually just a yesterday example is, so we've been creating content now for about, we started having up in August of 2018. So going on about a year and a half. One of my colleagues, Stan Cope, just does he's got such a crazy background, but he basically at one point was the top bug guy in the Navy. He served on like White House Task Force for Zika. And just every time he talks, I'm like, I want to ingest as much of it, right? And that's one thing that I personally love about pest control, coming from a marketing side is, it's just so curious and just so fascinating to me. And every time Stan talks, I'm like, I need to write all this down because there's a piece of content behind all this, right? He's like a walking content machine, even though he doesn't know it. So
that's how I'm thinking all the time, by the way. I'm just, that makes great content. That would make great content. I'm just thinking in that mode all the time. So so that's awesome.
Yeah. There's Austin, the author's name is Austin Kleon. And he wrote these, they're like real small books, like you can read them in like under a day. And he was just all about sharing, opening your cabinet of curiosities, right? So when you think about your brand and interacting with people, and one thing is open up your cabinet of curiosities. Like, what are you into? Like, you're into pests, so share that world with everybody. So we have been, writing about mosquitoes since August 2018, right? And Stan's produced just a ton of great content. And we finally went, and it's when I started learning about what a pillar page is. And I said, geez, we haven't been putting this all together in one thing. So we actually went and took the time and invested, and we actually created a pillar page on our website that's all about, mosquito. For a lot of companies, I mean, obviously you're different, right? It can be an add-on service for them, right? So it's incremental revenue besides what they normally do. But for a lot of people, it can be very confusing about, well, what do I need to do and how do I get into it? So we wrote a pillar page that was all dedicated to, like, if you're just starting out, what are the things you need to do to start a mosquito service? And we didn't just, hey, here's the products we recommend. Now, certainly, I mean, I wouldn't be doing my job if that wasn't part of what we did. But the bigger thing is talking about how you want to market your service. What time of year do you want to market? What species are you going to be looking at? What are some ways that you can get the word out, just on a local level and become a mosquito expert, right? And so we put that all together in a pillar page. And we actually launched it. We actually shared it yesterday. It's actually been up for a little bit on the website on the back.
You have a link to that, or you have a
URL? I can send you a link. The quickest way to find it, it's just going to be, catchmasterpro.com. And on the top banner navigation, there's an industry guide drop down, and there's a mosquito management program that you'll find there. So just catchmasterpro.com, look for industry guides. There's only one up. It's a first pillar page, so it's easy to find. But we'll have some more that we're going to be developing in the future around other verticals. And so one of the biggest things for us is we try to drive people to sign up for our email newsletter. And so generally speaking, I'll share the numbers. I'm not shy about that. Any given month we'll get about 5 email signups. But that's gold for us because that's like a long-term, again, going back to the idea of like long-term strategy is that's someone now that's going to get a Catchmaster email. And even if they just look at it, it's a reminder that the brand's there, that it's a presence. And we do serve up like our helpful content and directing people to it. But just yesterday alone, just sharing, hey, we launched a Pinwheel page. Hey, here's something you might want to go show up. And the key thing we did is it's available as a web page, but you can get it through email as a downloadable PDF.
Right.
And there's a link to sign up for the email to get the PDF. So just yesterday alone, just the first day launching it, we got, it was over 20 email signups. So that's typically what we would normally get in a 4-month period, basically in a 1-day period. So, and the key thing for that is that's only going to help us down the road when it comes to search engine optimization, because it is all baked into that.
Yeah, but here's what the average guy, and you just said something that was so profound, that you said it's only 5, but think about all the staff and all the people you have,
yes, working
behind this to get 5,
right?
And what 5 means to you in the lifetime value of what happens. Most people would say, wow, only 5? Do I really want only 5? I look at it, if I got one initial extra a month from one of my contents, that's enough to pay one truck off.
Sure.
So this whole idea that it have to be these massive numbers when you have a very niche, narrow market. I'd rather have 5 people that are passionate like me about using Final Feed. I mean, that's just, I've been, and I was told to talk to Stan. I haven't had a chance to bring him on the show. And to talk about, because I know he's dealing with the whole Final Feed thing, and he has an enormous amount of knowledge and background on the mosquito part of it, which I've been trying to reach out. So put him on the spot and tell him he has to come on my show, because now he's on the spot.
So I'm actually going to use my pen now, because I'm a big follow-up guy. So this is the first time. This whole time. That's a follow-up. I will reach out to Stan.
So we can do an entire podcast on nothing but Final Feed. But
I would love that.
To me, who is now switching over and making a push from the traditional systemic synthetic pesticide over to Final Feed, because I've used Final Feed in the previous formulation before it was owned by Catchmaster for over 2 years, and I know it works. I have but one of the things is it's that there's a perfect fit for our company, because we are an eco-friendly company.
Yes.
And this is a product that when it works, it's a game changer for our business, because it actually, in most cases, it will perform better than the misting and spraying approach. Yes. Especially when you're dealing with multiple species of mosquitoes like we have in Florida, where we do have Aedes aegypti, where we do have Culex, where we do have Anopheles, and we have brackish water, and we have salt water, and we have fresh water, and we have ponds, and we have all canals. Miami is surrounded by water no matter which way you look at it. And what I found is, especially on those more difficult properties, the more difficult the property is because of its ecology around it. Yes. What I find is the better Final Feed is for us.
Oh, interesting.
Versus the misting. This is what we're gathering now, because we're doing it in properties where we're doing oceanfront property. You can't use with an oceanfront property. Right. There's brackish water, there's salt water. We're getting all kinds of mosquitoes, and we're doing testing on these properties that are the hardest cases versus a property that's just all lawn. Right. So this is one of the things about that. If you find the marriage between that niche product and somebody like me who raves about this product, who I've been raving about it, but I go onto the groups and it's like, oh, natural stuff doesn't work. It's, that's BS, it's hocus pocus. No, I actually spent about several cases, which I could only get it from one supplier at one time when it was the other brand. I couldn't buy it from, nobody had it. Now everybody has it and everybody's knowing about it. But the application time that it takes to apply this, the cost savings in the labor. People say, well, it's an expensive product. Yeah, but Look how much you have to use on a property, 5% of the property. And this product is freaking amazing, and it works. I've used to use garlic spray products that didn't work because we tried that. We tried doing the irrigation system where we set up through the irrigation system, and it didn't work. I mean, I spent a lot of time and a lot of money doing that research and failing.
Right.
People say they don't have the stomach to fail that way, and tell a customer, hey, listen, we're going to install an entire misting system, an irrigation system, and we're going to pay the cost. And we're going to put it for free to test on your property for a year to see if this thing even works.
Yeah.
With one manufacturer. And
in terms of equipment.
Before we actually, because we didn't take the manufacturer's word for it that it actually worked. So that test right there was $3,000 test on one property.
Just to set up, right?
Which was an acre property. And with a garlic juice that you're supposed to be able to put it in it, and it didn't work.
Yeah.
And when we started using the final feed product, we were like, it must be a fluke. This thing, no mosquitoes. It's a fluke. We just got lucky. So we started using it on another property. And I basically, what I normally do is anytime I'm going to take a product, I'll take 10 different properties. And I do a test on 10. And I'll spend several.
It's like an A/B test.
Yeah. So I spend several $1,000s on between labor and, give it away. So we give it away usually to 10 properties, and we do it for a year. We don't do it for like 1 month.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, we'll do it. If we're doing a mosquito product, I'll do it for an entire, because I want to know at the height of the season, at the low part of the season, where, if it's even necessary to keep using it. And then do I need it once a month? Do I need it every 2 weeks? I got one property where we started doing it weekly. Then we moved to 2 weeks. Then we moved to a month and said, no, a month. No, we got to go back to a week. Right. So that's a lot of money and to test it, but totally convinced that this is probably the best thing, that it is a true game changer for people who are looking for, and the mentality of that customer that says, I want an eco-friendly product, to immediately have an eco-friendly product that actually works with a very little learning curve.
Yeah.
And that's, so if you're constantly putting it out and you might not, and you're getting a lot of pushback from, in the comments and stuff doesn't work, is there are people out there, once they try it, they're like, freaking A, it works. I mean, what the heck, dude? But and there's a lot of science behind, a lot of articles have been written about ATSBs and ASBs, which I was one of the, I'm an early adopter of all this, so I'm the guy that if you put it out, I'm the first guy's going to try it to make sure, because that's in line with our brand. It's in line with our vision. It's in line with our mission, our culture, the trust factor. We make a brand promise to our customers that we won't unnecessarily contaminate the inside of that home unnecessarily for any reason. Yeah. We actually have a strict zero spray policy. We tell it to our clients. 99% of the time, we don't have to spray inside that home to solve that problem. We can do it with minimum impact, bait, crack and crevice, usually baits. And so we're really big on baits, and this is one of those products that I'm just really, 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 really passionate about, because of it works and it doesn't require that much more than with, when you think about it, you have to put out the traditional service, you got to put out pyrethroid, you're putting out an IGR, and then you're putting out maybe a surfactant, and you're putting on something else in there to get it to work. With this is you're using one product. I do it with a half gallon. I can do most houses. A half gallon tank. That's what we're using. Yeah. A little $10 spot spraying. Yep. I mean, there's no major equipment you need to buy with this thing.
Yeah.
It's just unfreaking real that you can actually, so people are like, man, it's expensive. Yeah, but look at the cost savings. You don't need you don't need a $400, $700 misting backpack. And you're doing, I do an entire I can do an acre with 1 gallon.
Yeah.
Which is a quart, which is what? We're at $30 a case. So what is that? Like $7.50 in chemicals to do an acre?
Right.
With 1 gallon of product. It's like, it really is a no-brainer on this product. So tell Stan I want to know more about it. And
yeah, I will.
Yeah, we want to do this. But anything that, I mean, we talked a lot about, and strategy for me is like really easy. I've just learned to do a strategy. For me, is like a wheel, and then the tactics are all the spokes.
I mean, look, the amount of time that you were investing in, all the videos and all the blog posts you were doing, right? That was part of your strategy.
Yeah.
And strategy is a long-term game. And that's why I encourage people to think about it. Like, have sessions, sit down with your team, brainstorm ideas. Like, what does your company want to be? What does it want to embody? Right? Because this is the bed that you're going to live in for a little while, right? Yeah. Or, hopefully for as long as you have that company, right? So, I mean, kudos to you. You were investing in the right, the right avenues, but it was all part of your strategy, right?
Yeah. Let me ask you a question. What book, I know you guys that do a lot of marketing and a lot of people read a lot of books. Yeah. And especially in marketing, what's the one book that's really impacted you?
Really impacted me. So the most recent one it's a book called Everybody Lies. And I don't recall the author's name. I should off the top of my head. But you can, Amazon or Google it. And basically, Everybody Lies. It's all about big data sets. Okay. That, for the first time, consumers, right, are really producing all sorts of mineable data points. Okay. So, I always laugh when people are like, oh, Facebook and privacy, and Facebook doesn't want to know your social security number. Facebook doesn't want to know, where you live. I mean, you put that in there, but Facebook doesn't care if you lie about it. But what Facebook really cares about, the personal data they really care about, is how you interact with that, right? So how you interact with when you type things in, right? That's what Facebook cares about. And the reason they care about that is because whatever Chris is searching right now, I want to keep serving up more and more of that, so Chris spends more time on my platform.
Right.
So basically, this book looks at, so across Google, across Facebook, all that sort of stuff. What are some of the things that people are saying that they'll tell you, and then things they're doing in different life, which is expressed through search or being on social media, where it's not me talking to you, it's me by myself expressing my thoughts, what I really want to pay attention to. And there's all sorts of stuff it even talks about, the difference when people are on social media versus, what they'll Google search. So on social media, no one ever really in general talks bad about their significant other.
Right.
But when it comes to search, it's entirely different. So it was just a fascinating read, just in terms of consumers and what they're revealing to us.
Yeah, I had a similar experience with Dataclysm.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah, where they did an experiment on social dating sites, and the difference between, that's why when I look at what people put on groups and all that, I take that with a grain of salt, because I realize they're not posting what they really would do, but they're showing what they really think. And this is where people, when they're doing online marketing and things like that they're afraid to do certain things in marketing. But the reality is that what marketers understand is that data, that they have those trigger points, because they know how people are going to behave.
Exactly.
And the online behavior is different than what people say when they're in an intimate group.
Yep.
What you would not say in front of your wife or friends, you're actually manifesting that online. And this is where people need to understand that they can't, and again, marketing is looked at something sleazy. It used to be the car sales guy.
Yeah.
But now the marketer is also a sleazy, to be a marketer, or worse yet, to be called an influencer. I mean, people are like, you're an influencer. No, I'm not, dude. Nobody's listening to this podcast. I understand. I know where my numbers are, but I have a long-term vision of what I can do with this, the good I can do with this, what is happening, and what I plan to do in the next 10 years as a strategy. So this is not me. You noticed I've never sold a product on my podcast. I've been doing it for 5 years.
Right. Yeah.
I'm not into that, because I understand that patient thing. I think I would have not had the patience to do this when I was 20.
Yeah. Very different life stage, right?
Yeah. So that means, for me to be able to sit here and just actually enjoy this conversation with you and help a ton of other people, because that's just me. I wish I could help a lot of people, but I don't have consulting time.
Yeah.
And you are doing something awesome that you already know how to do, and you're doing it for a great company, which I absolutely love that brand. And
Thank you very much.
Yeah. And it's usually because of the people I also interact with that brand.
Yeah.
That you have a culture of bringing in certain people and a certain type of person, like Dave Johnson, which
Dave's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, for no reason he'll call me up and, hey bud, I just saw your post and I just want to make sure you're okay. For no reason, because he's not. I'm not even in his territory.
I know. Yeah,
I mean,
right,
so when you see stuff like that and you see people that actually care, it's not about pushing product. It's about they actually have a culture, and developing that culture in your brand is part of your branding. That people don't consider that's the brand. I want people that are loving. I want to bring people that care into my organization, because what we do is more about caring as a brand than the pest control. The pest control is a commodity.
Right.
What I want to show is that we care about their environment. We care that they're not exposed to pesticides. I know people will lash at me for that because I'm not supposed to say that as a pest control industry guy. But that's what differentiates me. One big book for me that did it, which that's when I made the leap, believe it or not, is called The Blue Ocean Strategy.
Blue Ocean Strategy, that's the name of the book?
Yeah. It's about making.
And was the earlier one? You said Dataclysm, right?
Dataclysm.
Is that a book?
It's a book, yeah.
Out?
Yeah, okay. It's a book. It's basically on the same set of What Everybody Lies. They just used a case study from a dating site that they created, and what people said in their profile and then what their activity was totally opposite. Totally opposite. A 40-year-old guy says, I want somebody to share my life with that has my similar interests and about the same age, yet he kept searching for younger women. I mean, so he was 20-year-old. So, the data doesn't make any sense, but, those are the things that I look at it. And, 3 books, I like Clockwork. Those are like 3 pivot books. I have about 5 books that really, really, really impacted me. To have that long-term strategy, to have the patience, to have to continuously do it, even when it doesn't produce any results. I mean, for the first 50 podcasts I did for 50 weeks for a year, nothing significant to write home about.
Right.
And I see most guys start out with, and they have 3 to 4 podcasts or 13 podcasts and they quit.
You gotta
because they don't. I think the strategy has to do more with the heart division. I think my strategy is really born out of vision of where I want to see the industry go, where I want to see things go based on what I personally believe, and that just drives me to do what I do, because there's no reason why a guy who's running a business should be spending 2 hours on a podcast or 4 hours. I mean, it takes me about 4-hour investment to do a podcast.
Yeah, between the on-camera time and the post-production work, I'm sure.
The post
and getting it up, and
even then, when I have to do the research, sometimes it's 2 to 4 hours worth of research to make sure that I have my I's, dotted. So again, it's
which by the way, I apologize for cutting you off, but I do want to make sure, and I say this just as this is me coming into the pest control industry, and you're a great resource to learn from, man. I just want to say that just as a listener, that I truly appreciate the work that you put into it. I think it was the one episode where you were talking about, I get something mixed up, but you were talking about like
don't be, everybody's mixed up with me.
But you were talking about, in terms of PCOs, right? In the pest control industry, in terms of what percentage of actual pesticides, right? So I'm going away from glue boards and monitors right now, but
right,
like actual pesticide application, right? The overall percentage, which was, and I believe, and if I have the number wrong, you feel free to correct me, but it was like less than 1% or certainly.
Yeah, it's about 5%.
there. Yeah. And I mean, just hearing all that sort of stuff and the amount of research that you do put into that, I want to thank you personally, because
thank you.
I think it's helped me as, a lot of things to learn about the industry. It's something I'm absolutely fascinated about right now. And so it's just been a great resource. So thank you for all that hard work.
And for the industry, that people see us as pest control people as those that are contaminating the earth.
Oh, it's not. No.
Yeah. The guy, the amount of, even the differentiating the factor between me and the rest of the industry is that I'm just fanatical about the amount of pesticide reduction I'm putting into that home compared to the rest of the industry.
Yeah.
So when the industry is putting out 1% of the chemical in the world, I'm fanatical about reducing that 90x,
right,
90%.
Even further.
And being fanatical, that's my differentiating factor for that client that is fanatical about the things that I'm fanatical, that is extremely worried about having chemical in their home.
Yeah.
That's me and my brand. That's not to say that I'm better than everybody else. I'm different, not better. And people say I have to be better than them. I have to be better. No, you in brand differentiation, you just have to be different. I just went radically different.
Yeah.
Based on when everybody's killing themselves to compete for that same market, I said, why don't I just go in a market that nobody's dying to compete in?
Yeah. Yeah.
And do that. And based on my value, my belief. And so that's my brand. It's not something that I went in because it's cool. It was something that I was doing when it wasn't even popular. But people don't see that I have a 10-year investment in that. And then I went into eco-friendly pest control when nobody was even talking about it.
Right.
And I said,
I'm way ahead of the curve, but you had your vision, right? You had your vision, and it's obviously something that you're passionate about, right? So, that's one of the things that's going to keep you driving, right?
Yeah. That's the only thing sometimes, because this gets darn hard. and sometimes it is depressing, the things that go on to do a business, and especially when you're small and you're by yourself. I get it. I know the pain that these guys feel. Yeah. And I'm trying to figure out what I can do to alleviate that pain somehow.
Help them out. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's really about sympathy and empathy for people. Not because I know what I went through when nobody would help.
Right.
Nobody would. Right. And so that's why I reason a company like yours, that I appreciate the fact when I get a call from Dave, or an email or a text for no apparent reason, because he's got nothing to gain from it. Right. To really, so that when I look at companies that I love to do business with, for what they stand for, not necessarily the product they provide. To me, I think the younger consumers, the older guys, and if we could talk about it, if you got some time, I don't know if you've got time. The whole generational thing, that what's happening with Gen Xers. I'm a Gen Xer, and both of mine, I have an iGener and a millennial as technicians.
Okay.
But I tend to think young and think in that realm because of my history. How are you seeing your positioning, your company, the pest control industry positioning, to deal with that when most of the guys are still in this industry are still boomers? Right. And they're not grasping that whole concept. And how do we deal with that in the marketing, and how are you guys dealing with it? And what's been your thinking and advice and things that you're going to move in that direction? Because it's right now, I'm looking at TikTok. I'm telling people. Yeah. I mean, it's no longer for that 10 to 14-year-olders. It's getting older progressively. Sure. And I'm trying to reach guys and influence the next 10 years of buying habits.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, one of the things that's really important is your buying habits, right? So whether, I guess the best example would be like Coke or Pepsi, right? Like, you probably determine that if you're a Coke or Pepsi guy in your teenagers years, and you probably stick with that, right?
Yep, I'm a Coke guy.
You're Coke, yeah, me too. Although my one friend in high school always had Pepsi, so every time I taste it, I'm like, oh, I'm back hanging out at Brian's house. Right. But It's like a nostalgic taste. But otherwise, if I go out, I'm wearing a coat, right? So, that's one thing to think about. And I'll say younger generation. So I'll just say, I'll lump it all together. Of course, one of the big mistakes in marketing is to lump everything together, but I'm going to do it right here, right?
Okay.
So let's say it's younger than 25, right?
Okay.
I think the key thing to look at is they're going out to buy pest control. And now, when I say pest control, I mean buying pest control from a pest control operator, right? So I'm not talking about DIYers.
Right.
So there's a couple things to think about. So number one is, and you feel free to chime in here because I'm going to make some assumptions right now.
Okay.
I could be wrong. Going back to the 80-20 rule, right? One thing I'm willing to bet is the people who buy pest control from a pest control operator, okay, they're probably, generally speaking, a little bit older. And the reason I'm just making that assumption is versus DIYing, okay, it's generally speaking more expensive. So I'm thinking a little bit more disposable income,
right,
have the ability to spend on a treatment, right?
Mm-hmm.
But when you think about reaching a younger consumer, okay, what are some things you can do? Well, the first is to consider the avenue where they're at, right? So TikTok's a great example, okay? And that goes back to one of the things that we talked about, which is when you do create content, making it as available on many different platforms and in many different ways as well, right? So, it may not be the most appealing thing to people, but you could make a TikTok video out of a cut of this, podcast, right? The video cut of it.
Right.
We would set a record for the minimum amount of views anyone could ever get, but that's beside the point, right? If you had a 6-second or your technician doing something or doing a silly dance, that might be the way to work, find that younger consumer. So you got to look at the avenue. But then the bigger thing too is what are their triggers? Because their triggers are most likely going to be a little bit different from a majority of your consumer set that you're doing, right? So you're really talking about doing something different. And the whole reason I talked about your brand preferences, if you think about, hey, if I can get someone who's 20 years old right now, okay, who for whatever reason, and maybe it's not just disposable income, maybe the pressure is so significant in their house, or maybe there's extenuating circumstances, like they're near standing water they can't do anything about, right? But if you give them service and you get the job done for them and all the awesome things about you're trustworthy, you're professional, you provide a guarantee, all these things, you check the boxes for them, right? Going back to that lifetime value of the consumer, right? So if you have someone that's 21, 22, okay, and then they're going to stick with you, like meaning, hey, every time I got to do pest control, I'm going to give Frank a call, right? That is more valuable perhaps for the long-term growth of your business and the long-term revenue stream than getting somebody who's going to look for a 1995 special or whatever it is. I mean, I'm just throwing a number out,
right? Who
maybe has more disposable income, right? But the key thing too is, again, going back to like, what are their triggers? Like, what are the reason that they're looking for pest control? And I'll just say some, again, very broad general things. You're obviously positioned very well because what we see is one thing for everybody. This is regardless of whether they're older or younger. Households with children and with pets. Okay, I think I just said children. Households with children and with pets. That's a key target for everybody. And one of the things, the reason for that being is there are basically a couple different points in your life cycle where you fundamentally, as a consumer, revisit everything that you buy. And it's when you buy a new home, the first time you're doing it by yourself, and when you first put a kid in that new home. So when you first bring home a baby and all of a sudden you realize all the chemicals.
Yep. And that's where we get now. We get a company calling us and said, I've had a traditional service, but we just had a baby and he doesn't offer eco-friendly. And that's why we're switching.
Yeah.
They love the guy. They love the company, but he's not offering. There's a new consideration now. And I get the same thing when somebody says, I got a pet. Yes. So I always ask when I'm doing my consultation, do you have children or do you have pets?
Yeah.
And that's part of my understanding them and saying, okay, I understand. And this is why we're better for your pet, and this is why we're better for your child in my consultation. But you nailed it. That is absolutely true.
That's gross. And that's like their trigger, right?
Yep.
So that is a trigger for them is, I need something that's safe. I need something that is, it's going to take care of a pest, which is a problem in my family. But, I'll borrow jargon that's out there right now, right? The cure can't be worse than the problem, right? That's their mindset. So, when you think about a young consumer, think about what is their trigger. And I would say, is there, and this is me just brainstorming, so this could be a horrible idea, but is there any way that, when you talk about differentiating yourself, can you have an all-in service that is minimal amount of chemicals introduced into an environment, and it's the newborn or the child special or whatever it is? Obviously I would like more time to think about this than saying it out loud, even if it's out of my mouth.
But that's okay. That's fine.
But that's, the type of things that you can look at as a business to, going back to your idea, how do we differentiate ourselves, right? So it's that younger consumer, what's their trigger, and how are you going to communicate them to in the platform that they're most likely consuming it in?
Yeah, and going the other way, here's the other thing I'm getting on triggers. I'm getting kids who have elderly parents.
Yes.
And going the opposite, they're not buying the pest control for them; they're buying it for their parent.
Okay. And is this like, are they in the same house, or
no?
Like
usually the parent lives somewhere else because he's spraying the house. I don't want him around pesticides because he's environmentally conscious.
Yeah.
And he doesn't want his father, but his father and mother, they're hard-headed. And he says, so I want you to do the service for that reason, because he's had this other company and I don't want to, they're sick, they got cancer, Look, I don't do anything. People think like, what do you do? And I told everybody, I'll put it out there, because the reality is very few people. I can give away all my secrets. What I found out, Chris, I can give away all my secrets, and there are no secrets. But I can give away what I do, and then only 1% of people actually do anything with it,
right?
Because they're hard set in their ways. But what I learned to do is take IPM, institutional, hardcore IPM, what you do in a hospital, what you do in a lab, in a high level lab facility, a level 3 facility or whatever, and take the same process.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll bring it to the home environment, which nobody's doing.
Yeah, that's
what
smart.
I explain to my clients. So it says, do you have anything natural for roaches? Well, no, we use IPM, and this is how we do it. This is why we do it. But I also have 100% mosquito service. I have 100% organic, natural flea and tick service. I have 100% natural fruit tree service. I have 100% natural shrub service. We just can't do ants 100% natural. But compared to the traditional service, we're like, 90% less chemical in that home. We never have to even spray the inside of that. So we're bringing all
so you
this.
can differentiate in comparison. It's not an absolute. It's not all natural, but it's more natural, right?
Yeah. And what I tell people is, well, why are you having this problem? And I get into the diagnosis.
Oh, yeah.
And about exclusion, I said, you realize that if you put thresholds on your doors from that garage, how they're getting in is through your garage, because they're getting into the garage and then they're getting into the house because you don't have a good seal on that garage door.
And so I'm curious, just when you have that conversation with a customer, right? And again, this just goes back to, a couple of themes that we've touched on, right? Which is, the expertise that your typical, pest control operator has that Joe consumer doesn't, or Jill consumer, right? Also with just, the idea of IPM and exclusion specifically as part of that, right?
Yep.
And I say this for me, again, having my eyes open when I first came out, I'll never get someone said, if you don't exclude, then all you're doing is creating an environment for another pest to come in. Like one found its way. So just share them. When you have that conversation with somebody, and so obviously you're pretty far along in the process at this point. And by the process, I mean, they've responded to your marketing or got in touch with you ever. It's a existing customer, and there's a relationship that you're developing, right? So there's a lot of boxes you've checked, and you've moved along in the consumer decision. When you get to like an exclusion conversation. What's like the typical consumer reaction? Like, how are they? Is it eye opening? Is it, or is it basic stuff that they've heard before? Because I'm just very curious for myself personally.
Yeah. So my typical consumer right now is, I would say, the 80-20 rule. We're still selling to primarily late Gen Xers and some not many anymore of the baby boomers.
Okay.
But mostly our big client is Gen Xers.
Yep.
And then we're starting progressively selling more to late millennials. They're in their 35s, and they're starting to have their families.
Starting to have their families, yeah.
So that's about 80% of our clientele. And then it can go mostly older, not younger yet. So what they're used to is the spray guy. They've had pest control forever. The spray guy comes every month and sprays.
Yeah.
That's the traditional, what they've experienced, because that's what their father did, and that's what they did.
To them, that's what pest control is, right?
Right. We use natural and organic, which we do have. It's not something that we say. We have 100% natural 25B services that we actually use those products. But when I start talking about natural control, and I go into the home and I say, look, the reason you have holes on the outside of the property and you have holes on the inside of the property. We might not be able to fix all of the holes outside, but we can fix the ones inside. So if we can seal underneath your sink, and you have a garage and they're getting into the garage and you have a threshold at the door that they're just coming in under and it's not sealed. If we just fix those two things, I just controlled 80% of your problem long term.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's what's more natural than not having to use the product.
Yeah. Nothing beats that.
So that's what we focus. So at every service, so here's a house that was built in 1950, because our older homes in Miami were built in the 50s. We don't have 100-year-old homes. So they're mostly built during the 50s, 60s. And every one of those homes that we go into, there's the infestation right there underneath the sink. There's the hole. And they've had 14 pest control companies in the last since 1950s, and nobody's ever sealed
addressed that route. Yeah.
And we say, why don't we seal it on? So every part of our initial service includes sealing.
Yeah.
And then we go and we look and say, what can't we fix? And it says, okay, this is going to be a major problem for you if you don't fix it, because no matter amount of chemical that we use outside is ever going to prevent this. Yep. So you still have to do this. And so if you've got, if all these vents, if you can fix these, great. But let's get taking care of what we can reduce. So now we have a 60 to 80% reduction in that entry. Now we don't have to use the chemical inside. So now we only have to bait inside, and we use baits. And we use baits in strategic places where nobody touches. There's no volatilization with baits. There is no movement with baits. There's no drifting with baits. So now it's more eco-friendly. Now we're truly eco-friendly. We're greener, but we're not necessarily using a natural product.
Right.
But most people say, well, then you're not 100% natural. I never claimed to be. We're South Florida's leading natural and organic leader. That's what we are.
Yeah.
And so people are afraid of using these marketing terms because, well, that's misleading. It's not, because my goal is, my marketing is to get my phone to ring, so then I can explain to my client my differentiating factor and let them make a choice of whether they want to use this or not. But when the customer calls me and says, well, I want 100% roach service or 100% natural ant service, do you provide that? I says, well, let me explain to you what we do provide.
Right.
Right off the bat, I disclaim it. I says, we don't have 100% natural. I have these other 5, but I don't have that one yet. And the reason why is ant behavior. Yeah. It can't be done with the biology because we have 7 tramp ants in Florida, much more than anybody else in the country. Yeah. So we can't deal with it. But here's what we can do. We don't have to we can solve the inside problem. If you got ants in your cabinets, because we get lots of ants that go in cabinets, and we just use 1 drop of bait. We use a boric acid bait for that. And we solve that internal. Outside, we're going to have to use a synthetic product. Yeah. Well, what about my kids? Well, we're not putting it in the whole yard. We're putting it 1 to 5 feet around that mulch area. And we explain, I said, the dog isn't going to walk over it all the time. Yeah. We're doing a perimeter treatment. We're treating the soffits. We're treating windows. Nobody's touching that. But we're improving the air quality in that home because we're not introducing a product into that home that unnecessarily. And that's always my case is it necessary to solve the problem? Not is it, well, that's what people expect, that's what we do. That's not my question. My question is it necessary? And then I get into whole this that says, and we solve it generally within 2 shots. But we never had to spray. We don't even do crack and crevice. A lot of companies do crack and crevice. We don't do any crack and crevice to solve German roach, American roach, Australian roach, and the 7 types of ants that we have. We don't have a need to do it. It says it can't be done. I says, we've been doing it I did it for 5 years before I actually launched the rebrand of a new company.
Yeah.
And I did it, and I know it works but I'm passionate about pushing that envelope and saying, what can't we have to do? Or don't have to do, instead of thinking what new product do we have to use? Or I'm just passionate about pushing that envelope, which most people aren't, but they're not willing to pay the price either to do that, because now they got already 300-400 clients that they can't. And I had to do this. I had to literally change my customers' minds. Says we're no longer going to spray. Here's how we're going to do it.
There's a big part of consumer education that was.
And so constantly what I do, 80% of what I do is education. Now, mind you, this transaction takes place on a 10-minute conversation on average on the phone. I close the average sale on the phone between 5 to 10 minutes.
5 to 10 minutes. Yeah.
Because by the time, because I've done a great job at branding and marketing, the consumer is already 80% sold by the time he comes to me. He just wants to know the little details.
They're coming to that conversation with expectations. Yeah.
Right. So they're what I've done is I've already, hey, this isn't what you think, but I've done it through the branding. I've done it through the marketing. I've done it through the videos. So now we have a more realistic expectation, and why I'm seen as the expert,
right? Because
I'm the only guy talking about it when nobody else is.
Yeah.
So that's my strategy. I'm talking about a lot of things on this podcast that nobody's willing to do. A lot of stuff that consultants aren't willing to say, that we've discussed so many things that nobody will ever really disclose on a 1 hour and 30-minute podcast.
Yeah, you're right.
So, but that's the new market. And people don't want to say, what if I say the wrong thing? Well, we said a lot of wrong things. I don't think none of them are going to be taken so far out of context. Because, you
can't be afraid to fail in anything, right? Not marketing, not running a business. I mean, that is, that's part of it, right? And I think there's a lot of wisdom in what you say, because what I hear from that is like, you'll be so hesitant to say the wrong thing that you won't say anything at all, right? And I'm a firm believer in, and it's got to match with what your brand is, all that sort of stuff, right? Yeah. But and I always say this is one thing that I always share in our building with everybody, because they'd be like, "Oh, do we need to share this?" Or I'm like, if we don't tell the story of Catchmaster,
right,
no one's going to tell it, right. And so part of that is, at some point, it's, hey, maybe this wasn't exactly the right thing, but we're telling our story, right? And so, kudos to you for having that.
Let me ask you this, because it's just one of the things that everybody has to deal with, and that's pushback.
Yes.
How are you coming into this position as a brand manager? As here's what we need to do, and how does that discussion go? Is there a lot of pushback in the new things that maybe you want to do that the other guy didn't do, or the new direction you might want to go, or the company wants to go, but the rest of the organization isn't on board because they don't understand it. They don't understand the whole social media. Some of you guys do, but maybe they don't. How are you dealing with that pushback, and how are you dealing with progressing in that direction when, nobody else wants to do it?
Yeah. So that's a great question. And to be honest, I've been very lucky at Catchmaster. I haven't had a ton of pushback. But other areas where I've had pushback in my career, and a little bit, well, I guess I could tie it back to a little bit of a Catchmaster story. But one thing is when you get pushback, right? So first of all, I'm a big fan of candor in business, because candor comes from trust. And what I mean by that is, I trust you that I'm going to express how I feel about it, okay? Mm-hmm. And we're going to come to some resolution in a business discussion, right? Mm-hmm. Versus, I feel like no matter what I say, you're not going to listen. So even though I hate this idea, I'm going to tell you it's fine just so we can get on with our day.
Right.
That's the worst thing you can have in a business environment, or at least one of the worst things.
Yeah.
So I was approached pushback as, okay, it's someone being candid, right? So that's a good thing. There's trust, like there's a discussion we're having, because they could have just easily mailed this in and been like, I'm going to let Chris go do whatever. I don't care. So I always try to look for like, what's the kernel of truth in the pushback, even though it's difficult to hear.
Right.
And I'll share, I mean, even, this, even just this week, we had a video that we shared, and it was, this is just internally. We haven't shared it on social media or anything like that. It's creative review. And there's a great music track that our, the person making the video put into it. And it was met with pushback from, folks that need to prove it, right? We have
right.
And I so badly wanted to fight for it. Okay. And one of the points about why they didn't like this piece of music was, well, I find it to be too distracting, meaning the message you're trying to tell in the video takes away from the video, right? And the music that's there takes away from the message. And so the way I handled it was, so I thought really hard. I'm like, okay, I'm super passionate about this. I really like the track.
Right.
But then I sort of thought, okay, let me share this. And I shared it with other people. I mean, they said, yeah, it is kind of overpowering. Like, I'm just listening to music. It kind of sounded like something out of like Pulp Fiction. Like it was like a Dick Dale type guitar, surf guitar track.
Okay.
And so there was a kernel of truth, even though I hated it, even though I was like, no, this music's awesome. What are you talking about?
Right.
It was like, okay, maybe it can be distracting. Maybe I'm a little bit siloed here, right? Maybe I have my blinders on because of how much I personally like it.
Right.
Let me get other people's opinions. So one way I've always dealt with pushback is like, look for the kernel of truth that you can find in it,
Right.
And I mean, so I tell people this, I'm like, I'm 50% German, 25% Irish, and I'm 25% Italian. But when things get, when I'm passionate about something, it's like the German and the Irish, they'll head back to the hills, and the Italian side will just come down and it's ready to engage. Right. And you know what I mean?
Right.
That was my first inclination, is I want to be, no, how can you not see? You're not letting us do these things for the brand. But it's always just, what's the kernel of truth in there? And is there a way to address that where we come to a consensus is the way that I've handled pushback in my career.
Yeah. Did you go for A/B split testing and then see which one actually made it and which one doesn't?
No, we didn't do that. It's kind of more like a small, although that's a great idea. Actually, that's an approach that I think we could take. We might I didn't think about A/B testing a music track until you just mentioned it right now.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's one way to deal with, pushback is listen for the kernel of truth and always absorb from people, like work towards a consensus, even if you only get 85% of what you like, but it's something that the team is happy with and move forward on. That's one way to approach it. I mean, I'll even share, our sales team, at certain points, they've had pushback on, a creative direction that we're doing on our print campaign.
Right.
And, it actually led, so first of all, giving feedback on creative,
right.
Giving and receive, it's such a human thing, right? That it's hard to separate, me personally talking to the person versus, hey, this is just a natural conversation between marketing and sales, right? It's hard to have that. But, and this is, kudos to our sales team. We actually, and it's funny because we did a form of A/B testing, which is PCT and PMP, they do their readers polls. And we actually will test 2 different print creative for it to get all the learning. And they'd kind of push back on one direction we had gone. I said, totally hear you out. I'm glad you guys are sharing this. I know it's difficult to have this, particularly it's like on the sales side, you're not as used to on the marketing side. We have these creative discussions all the time. We're saying, I don't like this, even though I know you spend a lot of time creating, right? So you learn how to handle that conversation correctly.
Right.
And so our sales team, kudos to them, because when we actually tested what was their version of the ad versus the marketing version, it actually outperformed, where marketing was at. So that was the way that I've handled pushback is they were, hey, you've gone too far in this direction. I said, well, let me hear what you'd like to get, what you'd like to see. And we went back and I said, hey, here's what we're going to do. We're going to let our consumers decide, because again, your consumer is always right.
Of course.
And I said, hey, we're gonna develop these 2 ads and we're gonna test them against each other. And it just so happened that even though I disagreed in the moment that no, this is the creative direction we need to go on. In fact, the sales team was actually correct if you look at just the effectiveness of the ad. So that was one way to handle pushback is,
That's great.
hey, can we get two competing things and go test it?
Right. No, that's brilliant, because you mentioned in the beginning how sales and marketing don't get together. And I know, because I've been in sales for 30 something years now, much more time than I've been in marketing. How is that? How does that go? Like in your company, like, are you guys having like regular weekly meetings? How are you dealing with that, working together? Is it a collaborative thing? Everybody sits down at the table? Is it we have a once a week meeting? How is that happening for you? And
yeah, so one thing that we've done as a brand, and I really credit our leadership and our team is so most of our competitors in terms of the spend, media dollars,
right.
I'm pretty certain that there's some competitors that probably outspend us 3-1, probably even 4 or 5-1, to be honest. Yeah. But one thing that the company has done a fantastic job of, and I really credit Jonathan, my boss, and the Frisch family, is they really believe in the people that they bring in.
Right.
And we've overinvested in terms of having, graphic designers on staff. So, the way that I handle that interaction with sales is, and our sales reps have heard me say this, is you guys tell me the tools that I can create for you. And I shouldn't say I, but we as a marketing team can create for you. Okay. So you tell me what your top 10 priorities are, right? Like I know the overall survey of what's in my world. We got our social pages we're going to be creating content for. We have our, print advertisements we're going to do. We got videos we're going to produce. But outside of that, what can we do for you, right? And one way that manifested itself is we're actually right now doing so. We do a ton of private label. So for those that don't know what private label is, I'll give my quick plug. Basically, it's your brand on our quality product that just helps. We've talked about it. Having your brand out, the more they see it, people can never be overexposed to your brand, especially when you're a small brand. Like the chance of someone being overexposed to your brand is so minimal compared to the risk of I've never even heard of that brand. Right. This could be people that maybe have, a monitor in their house, right? Or at a business where they work, right? Maybe they don't know. It's the first time looking like, oh, well, I would trust maybe the same pest control operator that my business had. How would they ever know? So, Salesforce came to us with a great idea, which is basically, hey, we have some targets. Can you guys just create these? So it's like a sales leave behind for us, right? Meaning we're going to show up for the meeting. Hey, it's a Catchmaster quality product. You know it, the products work.
Right.
Here's the advantage you get of marketing and having your brand and that additional presence, and show up to the meeting. Like, I'm going to leave these. Here are 10 monitors I'm going to leave for you, just so you show this is what we can produce. So, it's really been just reaching out to them, asking for them, what sort of resources do you need that we can create? But again, I'm fortunate that we're in that position because of the way that the business has invested in the human aspect, and having the headcount.
Right. Yeah. It's very important. If you don't have the resources, people want stuff, but you can't make it. That's no. I love the idea, because I've actually thought about, and I'm still thinking about it. And might have to do something on this pretty soon. To one of the greatest things that I can use to leave behind for a client, even if they don't buy from me, is monitors, and say, okay, even if you decide to hire another company, put these out, and if they're still spraying and if you're still seeing bugs, you might want to give us a call.
Take a shot. What do you got on it? Let me know. We'll have the solution for you.
Yep. And that's it. And I believe it. I do a ton of consulting on the phone. I got reviews, like just, I think one review or two in the last week, a company out of Orlando, a customer out of Orlando, where, he's 200 miles from me. No, we don't service that area, but tell me what the problem you're having is.
Yeah.
And I said, okay, this is how I would start solving this. And then if you need a company, I can try to get you one up there in Orlando. and he wrote a review for me of, even if I didn't sell him.
Just for the recommendation. That's awesome.
Yeah, just for the way I helped them. So that's when you bring in, you mention about bringing in the right people and the right culture. That's what I want in my people. That's what I want. That I care more about the customer, the person, than the sale, than the business, because it'll naturally come. Yep. I don't go desperate of how much I have to sell. I know that it will naturally come because I've set an infrastructure to allow for that and to allow for people to care. So I think that in those conversations that you actually care about them versus trying to, let's see how we can shine here as a department. I think and that requires a lot of humbleness, because business is tough. I mean, salespeople have big egos. I mean, I know, but at the end of the day, I tell my people is, look, if you've got a great idea, and even if it's mine, I tell people all the time, I have a ton of ideas, and 99% of them.
Yeah, you're an idea guy. I can tell that.
But 99% of them are total crap. and so you got to look at it and say, yeah, even if it was my idea, this isn't working, shoot it in the head. Yeah. And my guys will come up with ideas and, oh man, we've been doing it this way. And what about if we do it this way on this account for this reason? And that's a wonderful idea. Right. It goes off of protocol. But is it worthwhile trying? So a lot of the times they'll come up and say, look, we've done it 3 or 4 times. Something's not working. Let's try it a different way. Yeah. And in marketing, like people don't know this, but I mean, you guys doing Facebook ads?
So this is and this is one of the proudest things that I have is we're not doing Facebook ads. Okay. We do. And we've grown our reach, but it's all organic. We've invested in the content, not in the spend. So, that's a different approach that we took. My whole thing is on Facebook. I don't trust the targeting now, but again, this is for me, we're talking about reaching out to PMPs and
it's very niched.
Right. It's very, and I don't, for all the things we discussed about everybody lies and all that sort of stuff, right? I don't trust Facebook's targeting. Now it might be entirely different for consumer targeting. I would, but it's such a niche that, you're talking about 20,000 pest control organizations, right? And people on Facebook aren't always sharing where they work or what they do. Right. I've heard, and this is, honestly, so with like some of the distribution folks and other folks in the industry, this is like my number one question I kind of ask people. Are you spending on Facebook? Like, how do you target? And there are people who said they've been able to sort of triangulate a way to target and get down to people that they believe are in the pest control industry. But I don't trust that enough. But plus, we've just seen our content has reaped enough where we haven't had to juice it a little bit extra with Facebook. Right. I'm sorry if I cut that question off. I didn't. No.
No, that's great. That's great. Because I've thought about investing, but so far I don't have a need. I would. Yeah. And by organic, we're still growing at 25% a year, 24.
Congratulations, man.
Yeah. So we don't have a need to do it yet. We've looked at when are we going to need. I've had people reach out to me, say we can do. They specialize in this field of doing pest control Facebook ads. And it's like, no, I really can't take, because when I look at marketing, I know the risk that I have to take in doing all that A/B split testing. Yeah. And figuring out which ones are actually hitting, and you got to spend the money through that. Yeah. So when somebody comes to me and says, well, you're going to need a $1,500 to get 30 clicks a day, and you need to spend $30 a day, and plus the management, plus the marketing, which is, $1,500 to $2,000 a month. Yeah. That's a significant spend. You got to spend at least, maybe 2 to 3 months on testing. Yeah. And blow that budget on testing the ROI. See, the thing is, too many guys are expecting an instant ROI. Oh yeah. They're transactional folks. If I put out 1,200 flyers, I expect, 10 calls. Yeah. You're not always going to get the 10 calls. You're going to get, my experience has always been 1/10 of 1%. Maybe because I'm the market I'm in. So with me, it's just creating more content, but at scale now, because now I'm at a point where I can create one giant piece of content, but then create off of that another 20, 30, 40 pieces and then distribute it across 7 channels. And it just makes more sense to me to just double down on that right now.
Yeah, that's so smart. That's so smart.
So now, 3 years from now,
and your content's always yours. Once you create the content, it's not like a Facebook ad and the minute that you pull the plug on that spending, that goes away, right? So your blog article, your video, once set up, it's, and there's plenty of success stories of, hey, my article was there for 2 or 3 years. I mean, you're a testament to it, right?
Yeah.
2-3 years, my video was up 2-3 years. And then all of a sudden it got a ton of hits. You're not going to get that with spending on Facebook.
Yeah. I mean, just to get a guy like you to sit down with me and talk for 2 hours, it's taken me 5 years.
Yeah.
So I really do, man, appreciate all this. I know that you've got a lot of work to do, but anything you want to leave us with that, man, I didn't touch on this and I should have said that, or anything you want to leave us with?
No, I would, if you don't mind, I'd just like to give a shout out to my marketing.
Sure.
So, Rita, Damon, Evelise, Natasha, Jonathan, thank you for all the hard work you do. Thank you for, again, the Catchmaster team for welcoming me in, everything they do. And I can't thank you enough. I mean, I'll say this as a fan of graphic design. I love the design you have, the frog with the orange background,
right?
And the Pest Geek stuff. So, well done. And, I'll give a shout out. Anyone wants to check out Catchmaster, you can do us. Just do Catchmaster Pro, search it on Facebook, you'll find it, or catchmasterpro.com is the website. And, again, thank you for everything that you do, all the dedication for this. I know we went a little long today. I'm very talkative, but I've enjoyed the conversation very much.
I loved it. Let me ask you this. Anything that you can talk about that's coming down the pike, like a new product that you're going to be releasing like really soon, that is something you can talk about?
Sure. It was actually funny because I was just watching, I know you did the Snaptrap demo video. I think it was back in 2019, or I think you did maybe. So we have some new news. I mean, one of the things as far as rodent trapping that we've always tried to do is we're expanding our line in terms of what you can do. So we do have something that we'll be announcing around like Pest World time.
Okay.
So I'll be coming up in like September, October. But our whole goal is to be like that holistic brand, whether it's monitoring or trapping or be able to be like, hey, we can be that one brand that does it for all you. So we have a new offering coming for that. And then one mosquito product that we didn't really touch on is our AviCatch mosquito trap.
Yep.
And I'll just share one of the biggest complaints that we get is that it's not so aesthetically pleasing.
Yeah.
Which I do get. It does kind of just look like a bucket right now. So when we get to Pest World and then when we get into 2021 mosquito season, same type of functioning trap, but we've addressed the aesthetics. So that'll be some new news. Those are the next probably next 6 months of news that we have on the Catchmaster brand that I'll be excited in sharing in bite-sized little content when we get to it.
No, and whenever that king comes out, feel free to reach out to me. We can do a demo on it, and you guys can talk about it, and just come on whenever you guys want. Anybody's welcome.
I appreciate it. And again, I got my follow-up, wrote it down. I will reach out to Stan. So make that connection. I think you guys
Stan the man is
Stan the man.
Stan the man is going to be on the podcast. All right.
We'll get him. He's great. He's a great storyteller. I'm sure you guys will have a great conversation.
Cool.
And thank you again for those book recommendations. I'll get on that.
Oh, here, do you smoke cigars?
Okay. I used to.
Okay.
Let me tell you, I had I will every once in a while. My dad is a big cigar smoker.
Okay.
So I'll smoke them with my dad. But this is actually going back, so it's such a bad story, but like I started doing it in like high school.
Okay, yeah.
And so we had one visit where we went and saw our friends in Indiana where we used to live.
Yeah.
We were driving back to Virginia. So it was like a 12-hour drive. And I smoked a cigar the night before, and I got so sick on the car ride back that, like, even though I'll have it, I still have that in the back of my head. So but I do appreciate a good cigar, especially when it's on the back patio.
Yeah. I had that experience when I was 21 with tequila. And for 20 something years, I could not see the bottle of tequila. I would just literally,
yeah.
But this one right here, this thing is like, I don't know, 9 inches long. This one was sent to me. He sent me a bunch of them. So I want to give a big shout out to Jose Solano of Bug Boy.
from New Jersey, right?
Yeah, Bug Boy Services from New Jersey. He sent me this because he knows I'm a cigar smoker, and I'm gonna. This is like a 6-hour cigar, dude. I mean,
I know that's serious business.
I mean, I need to have like 2 coffees with this because I don't drink that much. So I probably drink it with coffee, and I had to try it out. But I wanted to say thank you to Jose. Me and him, he actually came down to Florida several years back, and we had lunch for like 4 hours. And we started talking about the issues he was having and how do we solve it, and how I've gotten through that. And basically that's it, man. It's just trying to figure out how we can help each other in really tough times and difficult situations. So thank you, sir, for this. I really do appreciate it. Anything you want to say, man? You got the last word, brother.
Okay. So the last word, I just want to say again, thank you.
You're welcome.
To you personally. Great resource for the industry. Keep doing what you're doing. Really appreciate it. And I'm going to borrow your phrase, but have a pestacular day.
You're the man, brother. All right, man. Take care of yourself. And I'm going to have this out next week for you. So
all right.
I'll probably shoot you over an advanced copy.
Okay. Sounds good. Thanks again, Franklin. I really appreciate
man.
it.
Have a great one. It's what? Catchmaster.com?
Catchmasterpro.com.
Catchmasterpro.com.
Or on Facebook, just do Catchmaster Pro in your search bar. It'll come up.
Awesome, brother. Thanks, Chris,
right,
man. Take care.
Stay safe. Take care, Frank.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
We hope you have enjoyed this edition of the Pest Geek Podcast. Until next time, have a pestacular day. Thank you for listening to the Pest Geek Podcast. If you have enjoyed the Pest Geek Podcast, please give us a rating, write a review, or subscribe to the channel. You can join the Pest Geek Society by visiting pestgeekpodcast.com. Thank you for listening. See you next time.